and making the right decisions, and whatever decision we're making today, to take into consideration that we're doing this for our children, that our decisions also reflect our values, and they are rooted in respect, fairness, and that God protect our children. Now they're going on vacation, so that in 2 months they can be back here with us, and we'll be ready for them. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I call to order the school board workshop for May 27th, 2025. Welcome, citizens of Clay County. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend today's school board workshop. This workshop is our opportunity as your elected representatives to collaborate openly among ourselves and make decisions that will decide the future direction of our public schools and the education of our children here in Clay County. There will be an opportunity for the public to ask questions at the end of the workshop presentation. Questions will be allowed. Public comment will not be allowed. If you wish to ask a question, please fill out a comment card with your question and hand the card to a deputy. Your participation is welcomed and appreciated. First up, we are going to start. We have some guests, so we'll do our conversations later. But we have a presentation from our RSM. Take it away.
Good morning. Come on. Come on. Good morning. I know I've met with everybody around the table back when we did our risk assessment meeting. So this is our continuation of that effort, and we're bringing forth the risk assessment to the board for discussion today at the workshop. This pre this meeting, we had a meeting with the audit committee back in mid-April. I think it was April 17th, where we presented a much more detailed version of this, had some really good discussion with the audit committee members, and as a result of that conversation with the committee, there have been brought 3 audits that came from our top 10 that we had identified for the board's discussion to consider which one or multiple of those audits to move forward with for the audit plan for this coming year. So we'll talk a little bit about the top 10 high-risk areas of focus in the suggested audit plan. That was what we put together and discussed in detail with the audit committee. And then the 3 audits that the audit committee had recommended, which also coincided with the audits that we had recommended. There was a lot of discussion in the committee meeting, but ultimately they landed on the same 3 that we had originally recommended, which include cybersecurity, contract administration, and timekeeping. And then we'll also have, just so that the board understands, some estimated fees for what those audits would look like. So here we have the top 10. We had close to 30 interviews with board members as well as senior leadership from throughout the district to understand everybody's perception of risk. Also coupling that with our experience providing internal audit services to 9 other school districts in the state of Florida, as well as other school districts around the country, we developed this top 10 list. So, like I said, this is customized for Clay schools. There are many things on here that appear on lots of other school district internal audit plans. There are some things on here that are not on every one of them, but nothing on here is nothing new to us, and it's not something that we haven't seen at another school district over the course of the years. And really, it just depends on what is the risk at a point in time. And so, when we think about an audit plan, this was really developed as when we went through this discussion with everybody and we worked to put this list together. We think about risk as a point in time, and this is what makes sense now. We always view this as something that is live, and we should expect it to change at some point. Sometimes things pop up in the middle of the school year that necessitated maybe a change to this, just depending on the circumstances. That happens sometimes, but traditionally what we look for is to have this discussion at the beginning of the year to set forth an audit plan, so then everybody has the same expectations of we'll go start once everything is approved by the board. We'll go start those audits, and then of course bring the results back to the board and the audit committee as well. So the 3 that we had identified as recommended areas for work this year were cybersecurity, contract administration, and timekeeping. Like I mentioned, we had a lot of discussion at the audit committee There was great discussion, I think, among the new members. It was the first meeting that they had. I think it went very well. A lot of discourse there, and I think they all had their own ideas of which 3 were their top 3. I think the convergence of them was the 3 that we had originally recommended, and so that was what they had ultimately decided to recommend to the board for consideration at this workshop. Other areas that were on the top 10 but were not ultimately recommended were ad valorem, and again, kind of understanding that that was a high-risk thing. We know that's coming up to vote soon, but also understanding that certain things, parts of that has changed. The district feels like, and board, I think from the members that we spoke with, feel like they're getting better reporting on that than they used to, and so it did not rise to the level of being recommended for an audit this year, but certainly something to consider in future years. Human resources, recruiting, and onboarding. This is, again, just an area that came up in a lot of our discussions. It's a way to look at how we're attracting and recruiting talent and not so much keeping talent. That would be more on the other end, but really what the onboarding process looks like to make sure that all new staff members, instructional staff as well as support staff, what it looks like for them to get onboarded to the district, filling out all the correct paperwork that's required for the Department of Labor, as well as just getting acclimated to what work is like here at the district. Internal accounts, this is another area that came up in a lot of our discussions. I think would have, without certain circumstances, risen to the level of the top 3. The reason why it is not in the top 3 is ultimately because we know with the incoming CFO, there's going to be some changes to internal accounts. We're going to be adding that, my understanding, into Business Plus, and so that's going to be a lot of the accounting for internal accounts is going to go through the ERP system. And timing-wise, from our perspective, it doesn't make a ton of sense to audit something right before it changes, or because there's a lot of recommendations that we might have that are become moot, essentially, or processes that are going to change anyway. It also doesn't make a lot of sense to do an audit right in the middle of a change, because that could be very disruptive. Obviously, my understanding is that this is going to be going in late summer, early fall, as obviously as internal accounts activity starts to pick up. It takes a break in the summer, but as it starts to pick back up, we wouldn't want to be incredibly disruptive to that new process as it gets done. But fantastic candidate for an audit maybe next year or the year after the process has been established. Teachers and the bookkeepers have had a year or so to kind of get used to the new process. Then it makes sense for us to come in and do an internal audit of that process. But I just wanted to kind of attack that, or approach that one head on. We know that was a big one in a lot of conversations, but there was reasons why it did not rise to the top 3, and that was why it's not there. Purchasing and procurement compliance, specifically focusing on non-competitive procurement. As you know, purchasing is obviously a large area where a lot of money flows through, and so it's just inherently high risk. And so we'd be looking at that process is specifically focusing on non-competitive procurements like sole sources and things like that. P-cards, another area, again, high inherent risk, maybe a little bit lower financial risk specifically. The amount of money that's spent through a P-card, very immaterial compared to the funds that are across the whole entire district, but there is a lot of area or higher risk typically in P-cards, especially with public scrutiny and things like that. If somebody were to use a P-card inappropriately, that would obviously be something that would be probably headline news in the county here. And so, again, not significant in financial risk, but significant in reputational risk. And so that's why it's on the top 10. Self-insurance, we know it's a fairly new thing to the district. We've had some turnover in that area, so that's why that one came up. And then transportation, and specifically focusing on fleet management there again. So, one of the things that we always present when we have these top 10 areas is this is representative of risk kind of in an uncontrolled state. We have not had an opportunity to do any testing. We've only had conversations to understand where you all and district leadership views these as risky areas. We know, based on our experience, where risk is and where problems typically are. But just because something is on this list does not mean that we think there's a problem, and it doesn't mean that we heard there was a problem. It just means it's an area of high risk, and being that this is a new internal audit function, it's an area that makes sense for us to focus on, especially as we're early in the function. There's a lot of things on here that we kind of call the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of internal audits, where, especially when we think of things like contract administration and timekeeping, that gives us an idea of how many of those components are decentralized. So there's a lot that happens here at the district office, but there's a lot of, especially with timekeeping and contract administration, that happens all throughout the district at all the different sites. So that gives us as internal auditors a really good visibility into what the control posture is and what the control structure is throughout the district. It's a really good way for us to kind of get to know the district quickly by doing some of those audits in those areas. So that's just another reason why those kind of rose to the top 3 for us. But again, I just want to reiterate that just because something's on this list doesn't mean that we think there's a problem or that we heard that there was a specific problem. It just means that it's an area of high risk. It's a good candidate for an audit. So we'll jump into the specific scopes that we've laid out for the 3 that were identified. So cybersecurity would be both internal and external penetration testing. So internal would focus on if somebody got in or if somebody already was a bad actor that already had access to a school computer that was already on the district network, how they could move laterally and what sorts of stop gaps are there to stop somebody from going. Because if we think about cybersecurity, it's not just one firewall, one thing that stops everything. It's very, very layered. I won't pretend to know the specifics of that. I'm not a cybersecurity expert. We would have cybersecurity experts that would actually be performing this under our supervision. But internal penetration focuses on once we're in or somebody that's already in doing bad things in the system that they already have access to. And then external penetration, as you might assume, is somebody trying to get in from the outside, trying to come in through a firewall, and really focuses on if something happens, if a threat is identified, what the district does in response to that. It would be impossible to think that any organization has absolutely no open doors or no open windows. It's more about what is the response when we identify. Are we identifying that there is a threat quickly, and then what are we doing when we have identified that threat to stop it and mitigate whatever risk there is at that point in time. So that's what internal and external penetration testing would focus on. And then the other 2 areas that we talked about, great areas that give us an opportunity to see kind of the risk posture and the profile across the entire district would be contract administration and timekeeping. So I'll let Weiss speak a little bit about contract administration and timekeeping, and then we'll certainly happy to have discussion amongst the board today.
So as Matt alluded to, contract administration is a common internal audit we perform, certainly when we're establishing an internal audit function. The primary goal of this will be essentially to evaluate the obligations and the expectations of vendor contracts that are executed. So what we would do as part of this audit would be to work with management to understand contracts that are inherently high risk for a variety of reasons. Maybe that's because they have performance or performance level expectations, or maybe they're just very material contracts to the district. So what we would do is we would select a sample of contracts, typically 2 to 3 different contracts, and we would evaluate post-award how those contracts are being managed. So one are all of the documentation and audit trail that we would expect to accompany that executed contract, such as certificate of insurance, any performance or district responsibilities that may support that contract, that those are executed and those are being monitored and maintained. Then we will also evaluate the actual performance of the vendor itself. So one, does the district evaluate the performance on a consistent basis? Do they document that performance? Do they have a means of evaluating invoices to make sure that they're complete, they're accurate? So we will, of course, do some sampling of invoices for each contract sample and make sure that invoices are timely received by the district so they have time to process those. And of course, that the payment amount agrees to the invoices themselves. Pretty straightforward evaluation itself. Again, it's focused on post-award contracts that were executed and how the district is managing those contracts. Timekeeping is probably the most common audit we perform. As Matt alluded to, it's usually an inherently high risk because it's often decentralized, so there's a lot of responsibility at the district sites for managing these. So what we will do as part of this project, we'll evaluate segregation of duties and access controls within timekeeping. So documentation to support the approval workflows by the employee themselves, supervisors, and then payroll on the back end. We will also do look at it on a sample basis, any overtime, leave, comp time that may be associated with a sample of timesheets to make sure that those processes are being followed as well. So obviously those would require additional approvals in many cases, and in many cases those are often not documented in a formal capacity. So if we see that through our observations, we will highlight that and of course make recommendations accordingly. We would expect there to be a sufficient audit trail, so we will perform sample testing to make sure that the hours paid agree to supporting documentation, and then we will look on the back end at the pre and post payroll monitoring that takes place to make sure that any adjustments to payroll are appropriate and that they're supported, and of course if there's any off-cycle adjustments that those are documented as well.
Timekeeping is one of those areas that is always unique for every school district. If you think about, I mean, a food and nutrition services employee enters their time differently than a custodian enters their time differently than somebody in the fleet maintenance shop enters their time differently from somebody in the district maintenance shop. And so because of that, we oftentimes, I don't know that I've ever seen a school district that's had the same process across all of those different areas. It's almost always everyone kind of has their own unique process that they've developed over the years for one reason or another. And so because of that, obviously it becomes higher risk, because as we think about the finance team here making payroll and relying on the reviews that are happening out in the field, that could mean something completely different in one area versus in another area. And getting a handle on that and making sure that there's at least, even if the process itself is necessary to be different, at least the review process has some sort of continuity, so that there is a supervisor reviewing time records to make sure that, yes, I do believe that this employee's time record accurately reflects the days that they were here versus the days that they were off, and so forth. And so timekeeping is one of those areas that is just always going to rise to the top because of its decentralized, especially at a school district, because of its heavily decentralized nature.
Which makes sense, because the needs of individual departments are different, right? I mean, when you consider bus drivers and the overtime that accompanies those responsibilities, there's a need. So we would expect there to be some sort of customization to that, but we just want to make sure it's consistently followed where applicable.
And then, of course, thinking of budgets, this is kind of what the estimated fees look like for each of those areas. Cybersecurity, internal and external penetration testing is very highly specialized area, but it's a very specific focus. And so it's actually, I know we had a lot of conversation about this in the audit committee meeting. It was like, oh, it's probably super expensive. It's actually not. We can do this pretty efficiently with our experts and doing a narrow focus, but a focus that gives your IT team and you some comfort knowing that there are good controls in place. And then contract administration and timekeeping, these are kind of our standard pricing for a traditional internal audit. So just wanted you all, as you're making the decision today, to understand the budget implications of what you pick. We would expect at least one, maybe two, but not necessarily all three in the first year. We've got to start off on the right foot, and there's a lot to get through. And we've got to learn the district, and the district staff has to learn us and our process. You all have to see the work product that comes out of it, so we expect that, and wouldn't necessarily recommend jumping in with three right away, but certainly those are the three that kind of made sense for us to have top three, and for you guys to have the discussion and pick which of those you wanted to move forward with. Yes?
How long would you say each one of these takes? Like if we pick two, are you going to do them at the same time? Are you doing separately? Do one at a time? Does it take a month? Does it take 6 months? Like, what are we looking at?
It typically takes, depending on the work, cybersecurity is quicker usually, with probably 2 months from start to finish. The other ones, usually we say about 8 to 12 weeks from start to finish. We could do both of them at the same time. We'd have to look at kind of like timeline. I mean, our goal would be to have this done by, by the latest by June by the fiscal year, in the fiscal year, so by June of 2026. It would be easy for us to fit these in, but we would also want to work with the district to understand contract administration is decentralized, so we're not going to be relying a ton, I wouldn't think, on one office, and then timekeeping also decentralized. If we were doing like two in finance, we might try to stagger them so that we're not taking up so much time of all the finance staff. So we work with leadership to really make sure that the timing works out right, and then when we get started, we would establish kind of like, okay, here's about the timeline that we think we're going to take this to the audit committee, and then of course the board meeting would follow that. We would establish that up front.
If I could ask, and I imagine everybody is thinking the same thing, but what is our return on investment for each category? In other words, your experience in the other districts, do you see more of a savings to the district in timekeeping with your audit versus cybersecurity?
So measuring return on investment of an internal audit function, I would have to say, unless you're doing specific contract compliance audits where you're looking for overbillings, which is not what we would be focusing on. We'd really be looking at the controls around what the district is doing to manage these contracts. I would say it's impossible to measure a return on investment outside of maturing the function, of the control posture at the district and giving you all peace of mind in what that looks like and having a consistent process to measure risk and to test.
Right, and it's about the transparency too, of where you all sit and what you're doing from an internal audit function. It's very hard to do our return on investment for internal audit, but we're helping you with sounder controls, better transparency, and better public confidence as well.
Because I would think timekeeping, there could be a savings versus contract administration if you're going back.
Well, there could be savings for both, because contract administration, we're making sure that you're paying for the goods and services that you are purchasing, right, according to the terms. Timekeeping, making sure that it's the proper time that's getting expended out. But really getting it back to an ROI is kind of difficult when you're looking at processes and controls.
So I wanted to, can I just add something from the committee meeting? So I was kind of asking the same questions at the committee meeting, and these are people who actually are involved, the committee, in these kind of processes on a daily basis. Some have a very lengthy, and when we were talking about it, the way I liked it explained was, these are like umbrella things, right? So cybersecurity reaches out, for instance, very important for our students, right? Reaches out like a big umbrella to almost every aspect, right, of our organization. Maybe it's not a return on investment in dollars, but we have to think about someone intercepting, I'm not sure if this is part of it, but the conversation with someone intercepting contract payments. Are we secure? Are we secure from student to student? Are we secure from outsiders to students? Are we secure? So it's really, for me, it's the umbrella of safety. I think the first one is why the committee felt that it was very important, and it touches every aspect. The next one, contract administration, is that right?
I was going to say for cybersecurity too, you also have an insurance component.
Yeah.
You have a liability.
There's that too.
Yep, not to say that.
Thank you. And then under contract administration, our contracts are everywhere, through schools, they're run through the county office, but it's another one of those umbrella things. And so that is why the committee thought that we could get our biggest bang for the buck, right? In having our processes checked for not only safety, but allowing transparency about how those things are occurring in the district. And I had brought up the 1% mill, but quite honestly, that's a fund that's separate, and we can produce documents from that. We can add up and subtract ourselves where these contracts, so even contracts does affect all that too. It affects your half-cent sales tax, contracts, they look at all contracts. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it seemed like the committee felt like you would get more bang for your buck, but not necessarily just in a finance way.
Right, well, it has to
Yeah.
always be secured as well. Yep, safety.
And because we focus on internal controls, a big focus of ours is preventative controls, right? So it's hard oftentimes for us to evaluate that actual ROI on the back end because we're hoping to reduce costs or fraudulent activity on the front end.
Right.
So
And
that
I
the
guess
downstream
that's what
effects
I'm
can be
asking as
benefited
well.
from.
I mean,
And, just going back to the comment, ad valorem is very siloed. Given this is your first time with an internal audit function, these areas, it gets us more from a broader perspective, being able to see your school district and how controls are kind of thought of, what your governance is like from that perspective.
Any other questions? So we as a board need to decide on 1, 2, or 3, and which 1, 2, or 3. So let's start with, how many do we want to start with?
I guess I have a question before I can tell you what I think, so, and maybe Mr. Brodsky can help with this. So in light of legislators taking their time, if we were to say maybe we want to start 1, and maybe things turn out better than we think they may, can we add the second?
I believe we can. We just bring a separate contract. So when the board decides whatever they're going to decide here and provide some sort of direction, we'll go ahead and we'll put that contract on the board for a vote at that time. There's nothing that says you can't bring another action to the board at a later time.
So in that vein, is it possible to delay beginning an audit, or are we under a contractual
I
obligation?
think we should begin the process only because the statute puts this function in play
Right.
at this time, so I think we, I can't advise to not do that.
Also, I know it seems like a lot, but $40,000 is not really a lot in the big scheme of things. So even starting one, I mean,
It can be a job. It's a salary for somebody.
48, well, I mean, I guess it could be a,
And I don't know which,
I think you should. I think that it's so, I mean, I hate to sound, that difference there is very minimal. And so you should do what you think is right, for the district and whichever you want to choose, not
yeah.
focus on the slight difference in the cost. Because ultimately, this is a pretty big deal for the district and we'd like to get it right.
and this could save jobs. This could
I would say
prevent
let's
legal.
begin with one.
Go ahead.
I would say let's begin with one as a conservative step forward, since our budget for next year is kind of an unknown at this point.
The committee they never thought 3, they thought 2, because they thought contract administration looks at the broad umbrella from a different perspective than cybersecurity. Like we didn't think it would, because it is taxing sometimes for the districts to go through these type of things, but cybersecurity is kind of separate, like they're kind of in different departments. And so we thought it might be easier to tackle cybersecurity and contract administration. And I do know years and years ago, we did not have Business Plus. So when we're talking about timekeeping, the district made leaps and bounds when we went to Business Plus and teachers signing in every day. And at each school, operating as mini timekeepers, making sure the paperwork matched. So we did make great strides when we went to Business Plus. So I think it wouldn't stress the district to do cybersecurity and contract administration, but I would personally hold off on timekeeping. That's where I'm at right now.
So you want 2, you want 1. Mr. Alberti?
I would go with 2.
2? The first 2?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Clark?
Oh, I'm waffling. I'm thinking 1 would be cybersecurity, but if we did 2, I still think timekeeping would be important. So let's just go with 1 with cybersecurity.
1 and 2. I'm gonna go with 2 and the first 2. So I would think that board majority would be 2 and the first 2 is what I'm gathering.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to hear what Ms. Gilhausen thought real quick.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that?
My concern was strictly budgetary, just having kind of an uncertainty there. And I think, to your point, Ms. Hanson, we could begin with 1 and then add an additional 1 if the budget comes out that we could afford it. But if you guys want to just do 2 right off the bat, I'm not going to say no to that.
Sorry, I thought you answered. She
I did.
led, so
Yeah,
I was,
I did.
okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure, I thought that's what you
I
had
did.
said, was start with the cyber one. Okay, so I think with board majority, we're gonna do the first 2, and start with those.
So both on the same contract?
Yes. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, thank you. Next up, we have Neola.
Good morning, board members, the superintendent. This is a workshop on rule development. There are 5 policies that have been listed for, I guess, reconsideration by the board, or in one case, first consideration. And I'm not sure what the concern is, but anybody who has a comment about one of them would want to let it be heard so we can talk about it.
So we're up to like 5, so just so on the first agenda itself,
Yeah.
there's 500 policies that will be adopted. Yes, this is kind of huge where we're at. And then we have very few that are kind of like little stragglers.
Yep.
Towards the end is the big picture of where we're at. So, Tom, I thought you would kind of pump them up a little bit for the good work. I was like, hey, that wasn't very motivating. Like, we've done a lot. We've done a lot. Now we're down to the last
Right,
little
the last
tidbits.
thing. 2111 is parent and family involvement in the school program. I think we did workshop that once.
9211 or 2111?
2111.
Family and community engagement.
Yeah,
So I'd always start with that one first.
okay.
Can we start with that one first?
Sure. This outlines different ways that the parents and family can be involved in the school program, and it also references the different laws that apply, which is the only policy we have that has a footnote. So it's useful for that.
This is the one that Ms. Hanson wanted to bring back with further discussion.
So I wanted us to talk about it based on our master board training, and this conversation involved around parent expectation, how we involve families who may or may not know how to become involved as a parent, because we all know that parents have a huge impact on their child's education from the time the child is born, and that impact makes that bridge between parents and academics stronger, home and school stronger. And I wanted to talk about it because a lot of it is procedural, but the procedural part also aligns with the legislation, the law, right? And so I didn't think that, and the other thing is, I know we have a very heavy schedule today, but this is, there was a page that was all struck out that was mostly procedural, and I actually liked some of it. So for instance, on the first page, which would be page 3, I think, oh, it's hard. There was a section that we struck out that said involving families. It's under E. Do we have it? Okay. We struck out number 3, which said helping families to provide a school and home environment that encourage learning and extends learning. Then it struck out, I can't see the last word.
At home.
But I think that's really, really important that we take a stance on that particular one to help bridge, because I've talked to parents who clearly, even though we have a parent portal, right, they don't know how to engage with their kids at home. They don't know education like we know education. And there are districts that have taken up this section and really, really just hugged it, because they are trying to bring parents actively involved in the academic process, not just coming and making cupcakes, not coming in to make some copies or sorting things out, but in the academic process. There are districts that are actually have buses that run around and they present to parents on how to be more engaged in the academic portion. And I know that we do things, but I think we need to keep that section alone as helping families to provide a school and home environment that matches and encourages what the district's trying to get. Because if we can get parents on our side at that level, then your academic achievement will go up. It's just a fact that parents are probably one of the #1 factors. As Mr. Brodsky always says, I'm not sure what the percentage he always says, but
86-14.
oh yeah, they're only with us 14% of the time, and then 86% of the time they're not. On the next section,
Well, hold on.
yeah.
So can we agree to keep
to that number
to keep
3,
3?
I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but I do think it's redundant, because I think number 1 says the same thing.
Yeah.
It says offering training and resources to help families learn strategies and skills to support at-home learning and success in
Yeah.
school.
well, I like the language of home and school environment, connecting that's big language in education, that home and school connection. Is there a way, if you didn't want to keep 3, could we?
I don't have a problem with that, it just sounds redundant
Yeah.
to me, but we can keep it if that's important to you.
Unless you want to change the wording in number 1 a little bit, so it's not redundant.
Would it just be easier to just add 3 so that we don't,
I mean, we could, it makes it easy.
okay, Mr. Alvaro? So you have, everybody agrees to keep 3,
That's
correct?
fine, yeah.
So can we add 3 back in underneath,
Learning at home,
yes, please.
And I believe that was the reason it was originally struck, was for what you had just mentioned, was that it was redundant to number 1. Yes, but there was certainly no reason we can't support that and get behind it.
That way we're not playing around with verbiage and trying to get it right. I think it'd just be easier to check that box. Okay, and your next section?
So the rest of it, like I said, was scratched out because it's very procedural. It directs the superintendent to do a whole lot of things, like a procedure, and I believe we do probably most of these things anyway. But I'm not exactly, even on the board today, not exactly sure what kind of a parent involvement program we have. So there is a disconnect even with me on a school board when I'm talking to parents about what do we offer, what do we have. I know we have a parent handbook, yes?
No, as a result of the conversation that happened the other day, we've done a engagement and support inventory that I'll share with the board, which goes over all of the ways that the school connects with families related to that. That was the discussion that we had, was the first step we ought to take is take a look and make sure we have common knowledge related to what it is actually happening now before we talk more about what ways we can improve that. So I do have that prepared before. It would be a good first step in the process.
So part of it says the information required in this policy may be provided electronically. How are we going to help parents understand the new commitment to trying to develop this policy, this procedure?
But don't forget, it's also one of your goals in your strategic plan. So the idea of parental involvement is promoted in many different ways across the district, and will continue to be that. Because like you, I figured out the math on this, which is 8614. And quite frankly, we need parents to engage with their children in the academic portion of what happens in school, just like you said. Aptitude will be another way to communicate with others that parents recognize.
Yeah, because it does say pursuant to state law, the superintendent shall develop. And so as you go through this, can we have maybe, when we're not so busy, short presentations on what you've accomplished so far, the goals, you know, how you might go about it? Because I do think it's really important, especially at some of our schools, to, you know, all schools aren't the same, you know. So I don't know what you guys think about that. I did not know that the work that the district's been doing. I didn't think we should put all these procedures, because it's hard to follow this many procedures when every school is different and every parent's different. So that was really that was all I really wanted to talk about, making sure that we're thinking about it.
We can definitely get a presentation together.
So any more discussion on this one? Discussion on this one?
No.
Okay. Okay, the next one is 3112, board staff communication. And Mr. Alvaro brought this forward, so Mr. Alvaro, go ahead.
I brought this one forward because I received a few emails from teachers that were concerned about their communication directly with us. So that's all I wanted to clarify, if they can communicate directly with us or they have to include anybody else on the email.
So what section am I looking at in the?
Section 3000, is that right?
3112.
would be part A, the first A.
Part staff communication.
So are you wanting to add language to that policy or take language out?
I'm just wondering how will they be able to communicate with us if they have anything to talk to us about, if they're concerned that they have to add anybody else.
He wants to take out not adding the superintendent on, is that what you're referring to? If a staff member chooses to communicate directly with the board regarding district business, then the communication should be sent to the members of the board and the superintendent should be copied as well. Is that what you're referring to?
That's what they were referring to.
So I guess they wanted to be able to.
Is this staff member or teachers?
But that's really the
It's
question.
confusing, right?
Yes.
I think that's where the
So
problem
let's just,
lies.
why don't we just clear for the record, that any staff member, whether they're a teacher or not, can email any board member about anything
Right,
that they want to. They quite often do.
yeah.
It's always proper if there's a concern for the board to then forward it to the superintendent, and someone responsible to make sure that happens, whatever it is, related to that. But I don't see the language as prohibiting an individual from emailing a board member, and they probably have done that many times.
Okay, so that was the.
Yeah, so if that is the concern, I would just reply, you can always reach out to any board member without doing that. It's just encouraged if it is something that, like, I don't know, the bus ran late or something, or whatever, like, that's obviously something that would be great to CC Mr. Rossi on. But if they wanted a genuine, sincere communication with a board member, it's not discouraged that they can't. I know I have received several emails from teachers.
Sometimes you even get anonymous emails.
But the
Hey,
language,
I get anonymous letters sometimes in the mail.
to Mr. Alvaro's point though, the language, I mean, if you listen to it, communication regarding official business of the district from staff members to the board, its committee should preferably be submitted through the superintendent, so.
I view that though as like a policy, a process that's
Yeah.
happening, not a complaint about an individual.
Right.
You know, I think that there's a difference between like official communication for the entire district
Yeah.
and one employee that's having difficulty at their work site that wants to tell you about it.
And to be
Well,
honest,
that was the concern they brought forward to me, and I'm, as their representative, I'm
You tell them,
clearing up here, you can clarify the situation, that's all.
And to be honest-
Email away.
and to be honest, I usually forward everything to Mr. Broski, our superintendent, anyway that involves any district staff or district knowledge, because our knowledge is actually quite limited on what can be done for people. And so in general, the board does, I know we all forward emails of concern, but I can tell you right now, and this is just coming from a teacher point, these teachers have no problem talking to school board members about anything on their mind for the most part. I know some might be concerned, and I hope that we clarified that today. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Any other discussion on this one? All right, so next up is 7510, it's our use of district facilities. I brought this one forward. Are the changes, new changes? So, ultimately, what my desire was to do was to make it to where our facilities could be used by our staff, essentially, and others. And, you know, we talk about community being involved and how I had a very long discussion with operations and with Mr. Broski about all of this. But ultimately, what I wanted to do, this was a way that I could find ways, if whatever happens in Tallahassee happens, it gives our staff an opportunity to still find ways to make money if they wanted to, like teachers for the summer, if they wanted to run a art camp, if they wanted to run, the coaches wanted to run a sports camp. This gives them the opportunity to do so. And I believe in June or August, one of the other meetings, we'll get into the particulars, because I would like to advocate that our employees that want to do this either get a hefty discounted rate on our facilities, especially if it's during the hours of operation in the summertime. And there's staff already there, there's an officer already there, all of these things, which those particulars will be worked out, I think, in that time. But then also, if it is a school-led thing and not necessarily like an employee-led thing, but the school wants to put it on, or, for example, like the church wanted to come in, that the majority of that funding goes back to that individual school. Because what's happening now is that money is not going back to the individual school, but we're still asking our staff to be there and to do essentially all the work, all the paperwork, everything involved for our community to be involved in it, and essentially there's no incentive. And I know that that sounds bad, but the reality is we're asking staff members to use their own personal time to do all the legwork, but it doesn't go back to their school, essentially. So I think that that's something else that we're gonna look at, but I'm just bringing that up so that when the time comes, that we're essentially all aware with matching this, and the new changes are here.
So-
on the red line.
So can I just ask her a question real quick about this? Because I actually wanted this brought back up for a different reason, so there's language that would have to be, like, brought back in. I don't know about the particular thing you're talking about. I don't know from the district perspective how much it costs. I don't know all that. But we did strike out in version 2, and I have a problem with us striking it out, and it might relate to what you're trying to do as well, because it says, the school board believes, and I do believe taxpayer dollars pay for our facilities, and so we struck out, the school board believes that the grounds and facilities of this district should be made available for community purposes. We struck it out. I'm going to give you an example. When I was a new school board member, there was a dance troupe in Keystone. They have no place to do anything out there, right? And they always used our cafeteria for a fee. It was a reasonable fee. The entire community comes out to watch the recital. I received an email, and it was true, that there was now this, for them, astronomical cost to use the same facility they had always used. Well, taxpayer dollars pay for our schools, and I don't believe we should be striking out made available for community purpose, provided that such use does not infringe on the original necessary purpose of the property or interfere with the educational program. So they were doing it on, I think it was a weekend, Saturday night. It didn't interfere with anything, and there was a new system of attaching fees. When we struck it out, we left school board facilities, grounds, property, and equipment are intended for educational purposes. That was it. So what Ms. Skipper's talking about is something that may or may not be educational purposes. I'm also talking about churches, dance troupe who has nowhere else to go that's been going there for 15 years. I'm talking about on the local level having some kind of reason between this version and this version to be able to provide what is necessary for some of the communities to use their own schools. So.
You wanna speak on?
Yeah, so if it is an outside organization, we still require certificates of insurance, and, you know, they're still required to have a business, and that's just to protect the district. You know, things happen, so we still have to protect ourselves that way. But we talked about in the guide, in the procedures, and if somebody wants to rent a facility, we can specify that more in greater detail in there. We have several user groups right now, and we talked about adding another one and specifying.
Because this says specifically for educational purposes, period. It doesn't allow for other folks to maybe use the cafeteria. So I think we need a bridge between this one and this one, or some more specifics.
So that's what she's saying in the guide, you can, it is outside organizations and other community
Programs.
Programs.
Yeah.
But if the policy doesn't allow it, how can the guide allow it?
It does.
It does allow. It says that the school board facilities, grounds, property, and equipment are intended for educational purposes. No policies or agreements will be made that conflict with this priority. So the argument could be made, Girl Scouts supports education. You know, going to church helps families, and strong families make for strong education systems. Like there are a lot of things that support and go along with educational purposes. I don't think it's restrictive. I don't think it disallows.
The way I read it is, like, first and foremost, it's for educational purposes.
Right.
So if somebody wants to come in and use our facilities, they can't trump our day-to-day school activities. We're always, they can't just because they're part of the community come in and, hey, I'm a taxpayer, I want to use it on Monday,
Yes.
at 12.
So
So that's first and foremost, they're intended for educational purposes. However, they can be used, by the community based on these other parameters.
So like
And-
priority would be given.
See,
to-
that language is an
The school.
interpretation, because this really does just say educational purposes, so that would be a subjective, like we just decide what that is. I don't know. I don't know why I would,
They're like a legal.
If I could, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
In order to make what Ms. Skipper was talking about happen, it's the removal of letter A is what we're focused on.
Yes, which is essentially why I brought it back up, because we do have A in there, and removing that would give us flexibility for district staff, outside organizations, and others to be able to use our facilities. And then more of the details is in the guidelines. This policy will essentially align with St. Johns County and their policy. And then like Ms. Ellis is saying, that the guidelines has, which might be what's confusing because that's not in front of you right now. The paperwork.
no, I was just reading the language that is in front of me. It says for educational purposes only.
So is there a legal way to change that to where we can meet?
Well, and they also, the board will permit, which is what you're talking about, the use of district grounds and facilities when such permission has been requested in writing.
Right.
A responsible organization or group of citizens has been approved. That struck out that language on this policy right here. So I agree, I understand what you're all saying, but I think we need to meld some of this version that includes what Ms. Skipper would like to see happen.
So you want to add that language back in?
Well, isn't that what you want to do, for people to be able to use the?
Right, it is, but go ahead, Mr.
Well, I was going to say, so one of the examples I saw in St. John specifically is the county wanted to use some of the ball fields for some of the recreational programs. The challenge was at the time that the school board's policy did not allow, because it was written very, very narrowly. I believe the way this is written, and that's one of the challenges we had to work out with the school district, was because we wanted to utilize the ball fields at Ponte Vedra. So one of the challenges we had is they had to revise their policy a little bit to make it more broader, more conducive, because it was written so narrowly. So understand what you're saying. The one thing you want to keep in mind is the way it's tailored here is it's written broadly enough where, let's say the county, let's use Clay County as an example, wanted to utilize some of the ball fields, even though it's outside the hours, maybe on a Saturday or something like that, it wouldn't interfere with the educational purposes of some of the ball fields. So just keep that in mind as y'all are writing this. You want it to be broad enough where you can partner. So I think the changes y'all made up to this point kind of allow for that broadness. If you narrow it, it not only raise it, you could kind of run into that challenge again where you could have something like that where it doesn't strictly fit within an educational, because the purpose is using the ball fields as an example, that is for the school district for the sports programs. That's not for outside sports program. But if you have an outside sports program that wanted to use it, if it's outside the hours, if it's not outside the primary focus, the way it's constructed now is that it would allow that to happen. If you narrow it, it could create some of those challenges.
I think she wants to broaden.
Just to say that community purposes as well, I'm having trouble with educational purposes. So we're saying if a church wants to use it, maybe some of our students are in the church, and so they're using it. Some of our kids might use the ball field.
Within the guidelines, so if you, Bonnie, if you scroll down to use of facility and grounds, under A, it says the superintendent shall review the facility use terms and fee schedule periodically. Any changes shall be recommended to the school board for approval. So that's what we'll be bringing to either July or August for you to review all of that. And within that guide, it has all the user groups and it has examples of those type of groups. And they include all community groups. It's not necessarily just for Clay County students. We do allow for other, other outside organizations to come in, whether or not they have students in the schools or not.
And there's a mechanism to revise it, so if a new group comes up, you can revise it.
So I think
Yes,
that's where
so-
that's your leverage right there.
Yeah, because the other version just says exactly that. It says as long as it's being used, made available for community purposes, provided that such use does not fringe on the necessary purpose of the property. So we're saying that the educational purposes, in my mind, is teaching, it's, math camps, but we're saying that's not the entire,
No, I just think the
Realm.
taxpayers, that's what school is. That's what the primary focus of a school is, to educate our children. Secondarily, you can rent the facilities, but you can't interrupt educational.
because everything we struck out must be in that policy then, things like voter registrate meeting for employee associations, use of groups indirectly related
No,
to
because
schools.
it's in 2. That's what she's trying to say. So number 2,
Yeah,
that will be in the guidelines that we have to approve, because it's in the policy that we have to approve it. So those guidelines are the user groups. That's why I think you're confused, because you don't have the guidelines in front of you,
no, if
but
we
that would
did,
be.
it's just the word educational purposes. I don't see how having a sports camp is for that purpose, but I'm understanding you're taking it into more broad.
But very broadly, because you think about, so the primary focus of like a soccer field that the school district controls is for the school district. But you could have an outside soccer educational camp, use it during the summer or something like that, and that still serves they're still teaching kids how to play soccer as opposed to, whatever, some other activity that might be.
Right.
So you can still link it to, it's almost
Okay.
identical to what the school district's already teaching.
Okay.
So the way it's written now, you can kind of fit that in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I'm an English teacher, so
I can
there's a direct intent of the word, and then there's subjective surroundings of what a
Course.
word could mean, is what we're dealing with, is that,
Well, the challenge is we don't have definitions. I think that's what you're looking at. There's not a
It's-
definition part of this.
But it's brought on purpose.
And I don't, in the years I've been on the board, I don't think we've ever had somebody say that they were not granted access to a facility based on the nature of the activity they wanted. You know what I'm saying? Because they
Yeah.
weren't an educational group, I've never had that complaint. Now, definitely the complaint about the fees, those went up significantly after COVID because
The
of the
fees were-
cleaning that was required. And then our new safety and security protocols require a lot of our district to provide. So the fees have gone up, and definitely there's been community complaint about that. But I don't think that we've restricted use based on, well, y'all aren't doing anything educational, so you can't use our facility. That's, to my knowledge, never happened.
But this also supports if teachers want to make additional funds and stuff
Right.
like that.
So
So that
you-
will all be.
That was my other question. Has this always been our policy that we don't allow, like what it says here for
No.
district employees? We've never allowed district employees to,
No, it's never been in writing policy before.
oh, it's never, okay. So that's all new language. And then all you're saying is let's just, okay.
This is new so that they can. It gives them the ability if they choose to. If they don't want to,
Well,
then they don't have to.
my question, has that been allowed in the past?
But, no.
Yes, they'll go ahead and they'll use the facility, for example, Cliff April does
Right.
a football camp. There's other people that use our facilities for that purpose, mostly for athletics.
Right,
This will allow them, as Skipper Watson, for the regular teacher to be able to do this too,
okay,
which they can obviously do that also.
okay, but it just puts it.
so to strike A, it doesn't,
More opportunity.
to strike A is just, we're allowing that opportunity if everything's done right.
Correct.
Okay.
And then what will be very important is the guidelines that follow
Well,
in
and
June and July,
so
which will be fees.
Well, that was my other question. How do you, is it first come, first serve? Is it, or like? how do
Usually
we-
it goes through a program called Facilitron, and the first step starts with the principal of the school who
Right.
direct all of this. The principal's either gonna yay or nay it, depending on the data, the function, and all of those things.
Okay,
And then there are guidelines within that book that Ms. Skipper is referencing that talks about how much that would cost. So for example, if there's a custodial fee that's needed or a security fee that's needed based on the number of people that are attending the event, those kinds of things.
okay. But say you had conflicting asks, like they both want the same facility at the same
The
time?
principal decides.
Principal's
what's on the
discretion.
campus.
Okay,
which is kind of which will, that'll be more details, I think, in the guidelines. But when used correctly, especially Facilitron, I've talked to a couple of people around the state actually about this in other districts as well. They actually make money off of this, their district and their schools, by allowing not only the community in, which also facilitates community involvement, parental engagement, but then this is another way that they can generate revenue. And for me, from a business perspective, I'm sitting here thinking about all of the things going on in Tallahassee and with budget and things like that, and maybe that's what made me think about this, and I probably should have thought about it before, is what are ways that our teachers can make money, but then what are ways that we can make money as a district, but that is positive to our community. And this is getting, I mean, right now you go and look on a Saturday, there's nobody using our facilities. There's no kids playing ball. And if you talk to several adults who grew up in Clay County, that used to be a thing. People used to.
Oh yeah, I got lots of phone calls when we had to start locking things up.
Yeah.
I can't go play basketball, I can't go run the track.
Right. So my point is I want to, obviously security and things have changed, but what can we do as a board to change for the positive? Not only to help us out, but then also meet one of our goals as a board, and also help our teachers out, especially if the funding's not there to pay them like we would like. It gives them the opportunity to work to get that. So anyways, that was my goal and purpose for this. I didn't want to spend this much time on it, but because I think that the meat of it is going to be the guidelines and the facility charges and all that stuff, which will be brought back up. So, are we good with these changes? Okay. And then the last one is our 9210. So I think we're good with these. And then this is parental organizations, and I guess for me on this one, I've talked to several schools. I've spoken to Mr. Brodsky about this. I don't know. I guess my example that I had sent, and that we kind of condensed into a different policy, was that there's two ways you can run PTAs or PFAs, whatever you want to call them. They can apply through the state, and they get their own account, and they have their own board. Alachua County does that. Certain, I think Miami-Dade does that. There's certain areas, certain districts that do that. And then or they have what we have, which is this policy essentially. But what my concern is, and what all the other PTA concerns and presidents, is a lot of their funds that they're raising are being used for things that they either didn't approve of, or they had funds there and they're gone. So whether they got mixed up in another account, well, they don't really have, they do have a separate account, but they don't. So it still goes through the school, that the funds were not used based off of a vote from that PTA. So I guess my frustration is either we give them the opportunity to do the board portion where they can file through the state of Florida, and they're held accountable through the state, essentially. So like, just like any other organization with a board and an account, they're held accountable for fraud and everything else. Or we keep it the same and we put tighter language to where whoever touches those funds outside of a vote from the PTA are held accountable. So I don't know what your feedbacks are on all of this, but I think that it definitely needs to be somewhere in our policy. I don't know what verbiage.
I'm sure if I could, you could put a procedure in writing as to how to conduct the vote at the meeting to ensure that people have voted on the proposed funding.
Can we put the procedures in the policy?
Well, typically you would put procedures in the policy, but simply requiring a vote of the majority of people there would be something you put in policy. It must be by majority vote.
Can I ask a question? I look at them, that organization, as an organization within an organization. It should have a separate, it needs to be a separate entity. You know, it's made up of a separate group of people trying to support kids, trying to support teachers. I mean, I know of PTAs that took their hard-earned money and bought toilet paper for schools, for instance, right? I think what Ms. Skipper's asking, I'm not sure what the answer is that there needs to be parameters, like some kind of a little wall around the PTA, allowing them to have final say in the expenditures of their funds. And I don't know how we can do that, because it has been really confusing the entire time I was a teacher, depending on what school you were. You know, a lot of them had to get permission from a principal to spend their money on the kids, or some of them had to, there's some wow, yes, having trouble today. There is a lot of confusion wrapped around it, and I don't know what the answer is, but we do need to do something to make sure that the PTA and the administration are actually working very closely together versus what's happening now, so.
So I think, well, first of all, that there are a few examples in which it's not working the way you'd like it to. There are many, many, many examples of it working. You're only going to hear the ones that aren't working, right?
Mhm.
So I think that putting procedures in place that then further extrapolates to those things that are occurring at that school, I think would be a big mistake to say that they shouldn't be coordinating with one another. I think most people would argue that the PTA should be in support of the mission of the school, not on a separate program that's totally different.
And they
from what's happening
do,
at the school,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So-
I don't think anybody's saying that.
So collaborating together for a common mission, but if the concern of a few schools is how the money is being spent, we can require a vote for the majority of the council to vote on that. I think that's smart, because you're never going to get 100% vote to agree, but certainly the majority of the council should agree
100%.
before the spending would occur, and that's an easy procedure.
So we have a choice, like you could put some verbiage in a policy, but Ms. Skipper, what if we made sure those procedures line up with the policy when we start to go through, and you know how we put it under the procedures tab? Then that would give some, I guess, meat to the policy, and then they could look at the exact ways.
That's fine with me, as long as,
If the procedures are.
as long as the PTO money, or the PSA money, sorry, is protected with a board majority
That
vote.
requires a vote of
Yes.
majority vote.
Could you just add that language, because there's a line here that says at the bottom of the page, not the bottom paragraph, but the paragraph above,
Yeah.
funds collected shall be expended with a majority vote to benefit students of the particular school raising funds unless those funds are being collected for a specific documented purpose.
With a majority vote of the
PTA.
Yes.
PTA board.
I mean, that's a
Can
great
we
solution.
add that language there? Do you see where she's talking about?
Because what
Under
you're
funds
concerned about is
collected.
expenditures, correct?
Correct.
So if
Because
you-
some principals will say, no, I'm using that for toilet paper. And they're like, but we're raising it for a playground. You know what I mean? Like, that was just an example.
Yeah,
And they're
so
like,
I think
well-
you can just, what Mr. Broski said, if if you guys are both good with a majority vote on the board, I think that you just add that language there.
Okay. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
You'll want that, just to clarify, that would go
Funds collected.
under funds collected. It would just follow that sentence.
Funds collected shall be expended by majority vote to benefit students.
But then we
Majority
could-
vote of the PTA. Or whatever.
Yep.
Initials.
For the parent organization.
Right.
And then we do need, like, I think like Mr. Broski said, those procedures to make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music, you know, right
I made
alongside.
that note here, for sure.
So that everybody can just look, oh, I don't know what the new policy means, or whatever, then his procedures would be there for them too.
And I would prefer that we keep it with the district, not with the state. Like, I like that it's part of our internal funds so that we can see it,
Right,
so that it's
and that's
accounted
fine,
for.
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that there were
Controls.
controls. Because there were, which I think that the incident got fixed, but like even the principal wasn't sharing how much money was in there, and it was getting a little icky, and anyways, I think we handled that. But my point is, I want them to know that it's separate from their toilet paper fund, unless they want to give them toilet paper fund, you know what I mean? Okay, that's all I needed on that one. Alrighty, I think that's it. Any other questions? Oh, actually, while we have Neola brought up, I know we were going to talk about this in board protocols, but should we just go ahead and talk about it now because it's a policy change?
Policy.
So,
Okay, let's do it.
it's in our, do you know where it's at? It's under
It's
bylaws?
in 0000,
Okay, so
in the beginning somewhere.
We, as a board, we're going to discuss, from our last board meeting, because it conflicts with Robert's rules, which is what we adopted, was that you have to have board majority to put an agenda item on the agenda. So,
That would be, there's a bylaw called agenda,
okay.
and let me find it. It's 0165.1.
I couldn't remember where it was at. I know we discussed it, and it was in our board protocols, but we were going to discuss changing it in policy. So while you're here.
Individual members of the board may place items for discussion on an agenda by advising the superintendent their desire to do so.
That would be the one.
That's the one, but can we clarify something, because I might just be behind on what my thinking is, but we were real good about bringing, like, maybe in my board comments, I would say, do you all mind if we place this on the next workshop, right? And so when we're talking about which Robert's rules is the majority of, if you don't have the majority, it can't be placed on the agenda. But could we also say that we should have a chance maybe to talk about it, like it should be on the workshop, right? Put it on the workshop agenda, we talk about it, and we make, whatever decision goes forward on the consent agenda, right? So.
Which I think is the proper steps anyway, correct? It has to go to.
I can just speak to past practice. It's, any board member could place any item on any agenda. That's always been past practice.
Yeah.
Because that's your authority as an elected board member, that if there's something that you feel like you want everybody to speak to, then you bring that forward on an agenda. But I understand Robert's rules conflicts with that.
Is the majority,
So
or
if you guys
the
would
chair and
prefer to make a
superintendent.
change so that in order to place something on an agenda, you would need board majority to do that, we can do that. To your point, I think if there's something a board member wants to discuss and wants feedback from the rest of the board on, you can do that during board member comments without it being on the agenda. But my caution to you would be, if it is not an agenda item, the rest of your board may not be prepared to discuss it.
Yeah.
And I know that there's been frustration in the past when you feel like you're not getting communication or enough feedback and enough input from your fellow board members. So the advantage to being able to place something on the agenda is that you can then notice the rest of your board, this is priority, I want to take action.
You're talking about for a future meeting? Or
Correct.
for that meeting? Not for that meeting?
No, for a
Not
future
for that
meeting,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, future meetings, that's how we usually.
And it gives you the opportunity as a board member to then attach your supporting documents to your
Yes.
agenda item so that the rest of the board can get your communication in the sunshine and you can have a discussion and take a vote. And there's been times as a board member, I can tell you, where somebody's placed something on the agenda, the rest of the board didn't have an appetite for it. There's no motion, and therefore it just dies. So for one board member, no one board member can control your board.
Right.
If the majority of the board has no desire to discuss it, you need a motion and a second to even discuss it. Does that make sense?
In Robert's rules is the chair and superintendent can do it, or if we're not happy about whatever they're doing, majority of the board can also place.
Correct.
Yes.
Which is what the majority of government entities actually do. I know the commission does, and I know across the state of Florida. Actually, I haven't yet found one school district that I've spoken to, and we're all on a massive thing, that actually does it the way we do it. So,
It's
Mr.
just
Blocker.
past precedent. I don't have a preference one way or the other.
So we do need to make changes to just that language right there.
Right, Mr. Blocker had a statement.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that when it comes to discussion items that the board wants to come through, the way Mrs. Gilhousen outlined it, it's appropriate. Generally, proclamations are ceremonial, so that's not something generally that y'all would have discussion on. What I have seen with other entities is there's a recommendation that's made to the chair by a board member. Then the chair can, if they want, can see consensus, say, hey, this is a proclamation about whatever the situation is. There could be consensus because a proclamation is coming from the board collectively. If there's not an appetite to see that, and I went through a federal lawsuit over this when I was the chair of a county commission, so that way you can have some input on it. But generally, proclamations are ceremonial. It's the board's government speech is coming from y'all as elected officials collectively. So, you know, that's something to consider. Y'all could put something in there where a board member, you have a procedure where a board member, a policy where a board member says, hey, I would like us to honor this particular event. Can we get consensus? If there's consensus, then that's drafted as a proclamation and it's a purely ceremonial event. Obviously, like you're pointing out, there could be, you know, disinterest in that. But that way, it's more kind of brought up in a way where you know, you don't have a packed audience full of people one way or the other. You know, one of the ones I saw recently, and this was litigated, was there was a recommendation for a proclamation to, you know, talk about the Confederacy or something like that. I mean, some people may have support for that, some may not, but I think the board in that particular instance, you know, that's not really something we want to highlight. That's not really a school board function per se, but because they had that mechanism in place to address it, they said that's not really something we want to ceremonially address. So that would be my recommendation to y'all, is to draft something where if there's because the ceremonial part of that's y'all speaking as a group, whether you're recognizing like breast cancer awareness or prostate, you know, whatever the issue is, that way y'all kind of collectively can kind of say, yeah, you know, we want to put that as one of the proclamations.
So we need to decide, well, I was just using proclamation as an agenda item, period. Is that not the same thing?
So generally, it's not an agenda item. It's just a ceremonial. It's not generally something y'all would vote on. It's just the board speaking through a proclamation. I mean, you have another smarter attorney in the room, but that's generally, it's not board action. It's the board recognizing collectively whatever
So you're essentially
entity.
saying that we need a policy separate for proclamations that from the agenda item?
So right, so what you could have is you could have a line there that says if a board member has interest in bringing forth a proclamation, that can be brought to the chair, and the chair can seek consensus, or through the rules of the chair, you can just put it on the agenda. You know, so there might be times where you want consensus from the board. It could be handled in a workshop. Say, hey, here's some proposed proclamations, and you know, is this something we want to put on the agenda for the ceremony of that? And we have, you know, a citizens group that's requested it. The court cases that have addressed this have really outlined that you want to have a policy and procedure for proclamations, so you don't, because it's government speech. It's y'all as government recognizing whatever group you're choosing to recognize. So you want to make sure you have a policy in place that addresses it. So if you say no or don't do it, you know, you have this was kind of the policy and procedure that we had in place. And the policy and procedure is a board member brings it to the chair can either adopt the proclamation for the board to put forward, or can seek consensus from the board.
So we can add that here and be covered as a separate.
Correct.
Is that separate from the Roberts rules where you have the majority of board can bring an agenda item, or the superintendent and chair?
I think it would be, because generally that would be more voting, more substantive business items. This is proclamations are more ceremonial.
So we need both then, if we're
Yeah,
trying to
that's
match
what he's
Robert's
saying.
rules,
Correct.
and then also address the proclamation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
he's saying add that verbiage here, so where should we add it here if we add it?
What would you recommend? I would think.
Well, I did provide a draft proclamations policy to the Kelly, I believe, Kelly, did I send that to you? Neil has a
Let me see.
proclamation. If you wanted to put it in here, it should be a separate paragraph, I think.
Yeah, I would maybe, like D's consent agenda, maybe you could have,
Yeah,
or E, move E down, make it E.
proclamations, call it
Correct.
proclamation.
And I haven't seen the one that you gave Kelly, but I would just keep it very, very simple, that the process for proclamations, because they're ceremonial, is it's sent directly to the chair, and the chair at their option can either adopt or seek consensus from the
Do
board
you have that,
at a workshop.
Ms. Watt, do you have that version?
So, yes, so this is one, what we can do is find a way to get it. It is highly marked up. Do we have a cleaned one?
So how about we do this? Can we agree on this verbiage to just add to this so we don't have to do a separate one? Do we have consensus for Mr. Blocker's verbiage? Ms. Gilhausen?
Specifically pertaining to proclamations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Sure.
Mr. Alvaro? Ms. Hanson? Okay, so with that consensus, if we can use whatever you just said, that verbiage, and add it there to this,
A board member may bring to the chair a proposed proclamation.
Correct. The process for proclamations is for a board member to, so if a member of the public wants a proclamation, they can go to Mrs. Gilhausen as a board member and say, hey, I'd like this proclamation, or Mrs. Gilhausen, using her as an example, on her own volition. So it would flow to the board member, then to the chair. The chair can either adopt the proclamation at a regular board meeting or bring it forward at a workshop for consensus.
When you say adopt it, you mean adopt it put it on the agenda?
Correct. At a business meeting, or at her option or his option, could bring it, if they see consensus, would bring it to a workshop for consensus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can do
Is that consistent with?
And then where would the other part go?
That
so
would
the other
go
part
where
would be
was-
changed at the top with board majority under the agenda. But you have to get consensus on that. What I'm hearing from Ms. Gilhausen, you don't want to change it. You want
No, I'm not.
individuals to have the opportunity.
I'm not partial one way or the other. I was just explaining kind of past precedent and what would be different now. So for example, like, I know in the past you've brought policies. You wouldn't be able to do that. You can't put the policy on the agenda. You would need to bring it to us as a board during like your board member comments, and then as a board, we'd have to decide, yes, we want to put this, does that make sense?
Yep. My question is, do you want to align with Robert's Rules of Order, or do you guys want to keep it as is? So do you want board majority to be able to discuss everything like the rest of the state?
I prefer to keep it as a board member can bring an agenda item, because we all represent different districts and we don't know what situation I have in my district, yours and yours. We can discuss in the workshop. I might, be able to take opinions and maybe we can figure it out. But I prefer everybody individually can bring a agenda item.
So the workshop, at the workshop,
Yes.
not bringing something brand new
No.
to a school board
It's
meeting.
going to be at the workshop. We never bring it at the school board meeting. We always discuss it before.
So, I mean, that's a totally different thing altogether.
Yeah.
Do we want to, instead of making it for all agendas, it would just be for workshop agendas?
I just think the board should have opportunity to talk about something together, right? And so the only way to do that is have it on an agenda,
Before we vote on it.
because we can't talk to each other. So before we vote on it, at some point, we need to be able to have a conversation about it. And that's it. Like, do we all want to have a conversation? If a school board does bring something forward, we want to be able to talk about it.
Well,
The
and let me
policy says that individual
clarify.
board members can bring an item for discussion by requesting it from the superintendent.
So that's
It could be
once-
for a workshop too.
Yeah, well, the discussion is, once we've discussed it at the workshop, we could bring something to have further discussion at what we had already talked about at the workshop. What we're talking about is bringing forth an
Well,
idea.
it would be on the workshop agenda. So like, as a board member, if you're going to submit something for
For
a
the
regular,
workshop, yeah.
for a regular board meeting, we would discuss it during the workshop because it would be on that.
So that's the way it works, like we discuss it at a workshop, then it's on the agenda, we vote, right? Or if we don't want to vote for it, we can pull it to discussion and separate it. So,
But that is not what happened.
yeah, that's,
So the point is it's happened to where it may have been on the agenda, but there was nothing to discuss on it, and then it was moved to the floor for a vote before we had opportunity to discuss it. See what I'm saying?
yeah. So we're talking
we want
about,
to prevent that from happening.
we want to be able to talk about it prior, so no surprises.
Yeah, we want to
So
discuss
this
it.
this allows you to bring it for discussion at any meeting or workshop.
So we're back to put it on the agenda, you have to have a majority of the board or the chair and
For
superintendent.
discussion or for just,
Agenda items.
For an agenda item.
So yes, for the discussion agenda.
you need a majority.
Well, according to this, we don't. It says any school board member can add it.
So if I can just make a suggestion.
Yes.
So I think what y'all are saying is you want a board member to be able to bring it forward. Why not just insert in there at the workshop? So board member, I'm going to use you as an example, Mrs. Gilhousen. And Mrs. Gilhousen wants, as a board member, her prerogative to bring an issue forward. She can bring it forward to the workshop.
Workshop.
It's on the workshop agenda, then y'all can discuss it and decide whether it goes to the regular business meeting for an agenda. Because this gives y'all the opportunity, so that way any board member can bring any item to the workshop, it can be vetted, then y'all can decide whether it's gonna go on the regular agenda. Is that consistent with?
It's what we've usually done, we just don't want
It's
to,
kind of splitting the baby. It's kind of
It's-
keeping things the way that they've
yeah.
always been, but also
yes.
tightening up the control a little bit. So I'm fine with that.
And let me just clarify, I think I know the proclamation we're talking about. And there was no intent to keep it off the workshop to where we could discuss it. There was no intent
No.
for it to just come before the school board meeting. In fact, it was on the April agenda. And I'm not gonna get into why it got moved to May, but to me, proclamation, you're proclaiming. We don't even read the proclamations because we have so many. And I think that's something we ought to discuss, whether we want to read that proclamation.
So now we'll have one that just says what you just said, then we'll have the proclamation one, and that should solve the problem, right? We could talk about it, yeah.
I still would like to see the proclamation policy. I don't know if there's criteria in there for what kinds of proclamations will be considered, if that's something we want to talk about.
So we don't have a
We need to talk about
Neola's
because now we've
proclamation.
opened up
We don't have that.
Where are we gonna continue to do certain proclamations? Because now we've opened up Pandora's box essentially to do a wide variety of proclamations.
I don't think we have, but
A lot of
I would
school
like
boards
to
have-
see what Neola's language is for that.
So I personally think educational proclamations are great. So like when we thank all the speech therapists.
CTE month.
CTE month. I think that in the world we live in, that we should be extremely focused on education and all the rest of the junk needs to go aside. You know, if we want to make general proclamations that affect education, that's great. But I think really anything that takes our eyes off the target, which is student achievement, should be set for somewhere else. That students and staff and teachers and faculties and what's going on in our schools should be the priority for proclamations. That's just my personal opinion as a teacher, and that's really where I think we should keep it. So,
Well,
So
and I
maybe we
think
bring up
the
a
proclamation that we voted on was about education. So it's all, I guess, subjective in how you look at it.
well,
But to the point, if we put these sentences in here about proclamations, that would address the board's concern and make sure that at the workshop it was discussed
yeah.
to decide whether or not it would advance past.
Can we expand it in our board protocols?
Yeah.
We could talk more about it in
Oh,
board
sure.
protocols, about maybe what we would like to see and what we wouldn't like to see.
So can we
I can
also,
print this out for you too, if that's something that you want to expand on in your board protocols
Yeah, for
meeting.
protocol, is that
And
the
then
best
you
place?
can pull language, It's a very marked up version, but I'm happy to get that printed for you.
Can we add that other verbiage
Can we
where,
talk about
the agenda item, what he said about,
Because that would be a policy. that we could
discussing
vote
it
on.
at a workshop?
I don't think we can.
And then getting consensus to put it on.
I don't know.
For a vote. You added that?
We will put that in where
Mr.
proclamation
Blocker?
says, yes.
No, not the proclamations, the other one.
Madam Chair,
You said
Mr.
there's-
Blocker,
Okay, hold on one
Yes,
second.
sir.
I'm trying to make sure he
At the very
understands.
top, there's a sentence that says individual board members can place an item for discussion.
Yes,
On a workshop agenda. I
On a
think if you just add
workshop. Oh, it's a
workshop, that would
workshop,
fix
okay.
it. Yeah.
and then we can do consensus on whether we want to vote or whatever. Mr. Blocker?
Yes, ma'am, I just, if, in y'all's next meeting, just make sure, because there is, y'all may be voting on a policy, just make sure they're not talking about.
I think Kelly can print that out for us, but I don't think we can discuss it in a shade meeting. I think that's got to be a public discussion, because it's a policy that we would vote on for proclamations.
Why would we discuss that in shade meeting?
We just talked about discussing the policy in a shade meeting.
I missed that. I didn't hear anybody saying we discussed it in a shade meeting.
Yeah, we talked about, could we talk about how to handle proclamations in our board protocol meeting?
Oh,
The
yeah.
answer is no, we can't.
Is that going to be a shade meeting, protocol meeting?
Well, no, it's not shade, but I understand your point, like, y'all don't want to be, because y'all could be voting on it. Can I just address one more thing about the, so the most recent case on proclamations, that went in front of Judge Corrigan in the Middle District. So St. Johns County was the one who, so the issue in that case and the way it came down was essentially with proclamations, if you're going to do proclamations and you do all the proclamations, if you're going to limit it, then you have to make sure that there are really some key points that you have to hit. Or you just keep it very bland. You just keep it very basic to like community efforts. The problem was, this is back in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of, on both sides, very politically charged, you know, hey, we're going to have one about the Confederate flag, we're going to have one about gun rights, we're going to have one about abortion. So you had school boards and county commissions and basically really, you know, picking, and some just stopped doing proclamations entirely. I think this process gives y'all an opportunity where y'all as a board can kind of vet it, where staff isn't having to, you know, figure out which proclamation to bring forward. Now, y'all aren't really dealing with that right now. That could happen again in the future. But really what the Corps said is you have to have some mechanism. You can't just have, you know, a staff member say, yeah, we're going to do one on transgenderism, but we're not going to do one on, you know, Knights of Columbus. So when you've been doing them for everybody, then you start kind of picking. So I think kind of having this kind of built in will protect you all. And again, we're not at that point now. That's not happening now. But you want to look to the future and make sure you have that right policy. So I just want to kind of tie the loop on that.
Okay, so we'll revisit a proclamation policy, but right now we'll use this verbiage if everybody's okay with that. All right, any other comments, questions for Neola?
And Neola, do you have every, do you have?
9 to 11, and the one that messed up. 92.
No, because that went with 9210.
Okay.
Yeah. And do you have everything, Neola, you need for this policy?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
Alrighty, thank you. Next up, Mr. Boyack.
Does that mean we're done with policies?
Yes.
Y'all did great. Y'all did amazing.
Oh, 300, is that what it is?
532.
505, oh, Lord help us. Lord help the district staff.
Sounds like that might deserve a
It's
proclamation.
better with
You said black.
Maybe it's something.
Make sure you read it, please.
Remember, I have the old ladies.
Go right there.
It's working perfectly, thank you. Sorry. I don't even know how to
Good to
hide
go?
it.
Wait a second, what do you want me to do?
We got a majority, so let's move forward.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So, Honorable School Board, Superintendent, District staff, members of the community, I appreciate you allowing me to speak to you guys today. I wanted to highlight something that was in recent legislation that was passed in the Florida Legislature, House Bill 1105. Bans elementary and middle school students from using cell phones during school hours, but it does allow for high school usage outside of instructional time. One of the things in that legislation, though, is a pilot program. It's going to explore a pilot program in 6 counties, 2 small, 2 medium, 2 large, that explores the effects of banning cell phones in high school. The DOE will partner with districts and gather academic and behavioral data to gauge the overall effectiveness of that. Yonder, which is something I'm going to talk a little bit about today, is partnering with the DOE to fully fund certain pilot districts. So I want to make this part very, very clear. My goal today here is not to advocate for Yonder or for us participating in this pilot program, but this is a decision that is bigger, and we need to have everybody on board if we decide to move forward with that. My goal is to provide you with information and find out if this is something that this school board is interested in moving forward with. The following presentation, I made it very, very clear which slides were mine and which slides were Yonder's provided. But I wanted to answer any questions that you guys may have. I've been working with the Yonder representative for about a month now, just trying to find more about the program so that I can be knowledgeable and speak with you guys here today. Bonnie, what am I doing wrong? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So and part of the reason why I'm bringing this forward is that, you know, this school board has been very proactive with cell phones. All right, we've been very, kind of almost a pioneer when it comes to the harmful effects on academic and behavioral information. One of the stats that Yonder provides is that the average person checks their cell phone 96 times a day. All right, obviously that's going to have a negative effect when it comes to students in school. We've been very proactive, and I feel confident to say that we've done a very, very good job of keeping cell phones out of our classroom time. Okay, are we working? Are we good now?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So one of the things that Yonder talks a lot about, and you know, we've seen through our experiences here, are kind of social, psychological, and academic effects of cell phones in the classroom. All right. When it comes down to it, I think the average social media time is about 3 hours per day. And what you're going to see when we have that amount of social media time, and the majority of students access that social media from their cell phones. So when we have that amount of time on our cell phone, we start to see more anxious kids. We start to see more stressed kids. We start to see kids paying more attention to other things as opposed to their academic studies. All right, so this is kind of what some of the negative impacts that has been studied through research when it comes to cell phones. 20 minutes. It takes about 20 minutes to recover from a nearby cell phone distraction. 15-point decrease in mathematics scores when distracted by phones. The 3-hour stat on social media basically doubles anxiety and depression risks amongst youth, and 68% percentage of students who report that electronic devices are distracting in the classroom. So it's very, very clear that cell phones do have a negative impact when it comes to academic achievement in the classroom. So what are people doing about it? You guys are all in the know on a lot of this stuff. All right, cell phone regulations are surging. 1 in 7 countries have banned phones in school. Florida is one of the pioneers in the United States in regards to banning cell phones in school. But 75% of public schools in the United States have some form of restriction on cell phones during school hours. The question then comes down to the effectiveness of that ban. Right? Phone bans are not enough. All right, cell phone bans are in a place in 77% of schools, but this high number refers to any school that tells students they should not use their phone while in class. That's not really a ban, that's more of an unenforceable wish, says this social psychologist. But I would kind of counter that and say that our teachers have done a phenomenal job in keeping cell phones out of the classroom. Okay, and that's one of those situations that we're kind of putting our teachers in a really tough spot when it comes to classroom cell phone use. And that's kind of what this next part talks a little bit too, is we tried phone buckets, boxes, charging stations. When you put a phone policy in the hands of a teacher, you're setting up an antagonistic relationship with students, because our students have become reliant and dependent on those cell phone devices. You guys can go see it in any event outside of school. Kids are constantly on those phones. And it's become a burden, not just for classroom teachers, but also for administrators, to try to make sure that we are pulling phones away from students, and now I'm responsible for it, and it just becomes a very, very difficult situation all around. So what Yonder's solution has been, and they're kind of the industry leader in this, are these pouches. All right, has anybody in here ever seen or used a pouch in that situation? Okay. So the goal in what Yonder says is that you have to have a tool in order to make a cell phone ban effective. You can't just say, you know, hey, administrators need to run around, teachers need to run around, everywhere you go, we've got to make sure the kids aren't on their cell phone. That would be all they would do all day, every day. So what they've come up with are these types of pouches to where kids put them in there, they're locked, and then they're ultimately unlocked at the end of the day. All right, so we can get into a few slides from now. I'll have a little minute video that will explain things. I know you guys have seen a lot of this stuff, but for members of the public and anybody else who may be watching. So millions of students have benefited. Yonder really is the leader when it comes to this space. There's not a lot of competition in this space. So I was interested when Yonder approached me, basically through the kind of the cell phone awareness stuff that I was doing about, you know, hey, is this something you guys would be interested in if we had a fully funded pilot program going? So let's take about a minute and just kind of let the video play for anybody who may be watching at home. Can we? Let me see if I can, whoop, I think we went too far. I think we both pressed it at the same time. Maybe not.
I didn't see a link in it to press. Oh, here we go.
Do we have sound?
Did I mute it?
On student engagement, social development, and mental health.
Cell phones have been linked to many of the district's recent problems.
Texting, tweeting,
Cases of anxiety and depression.
bullying, staging fights, and filming fights.
In an effort to crack down on cell phone usage, the district piloted these magnetic locking bags called Yonder. It's an easy solution for a generation in the midst of a mental health crisis.
Yonder is the established leader in creating phone-free schools. For over 10 years, our product and program has allowed students to experience the focus, creativity, and relief that comes from a phone-free school day. At Student Center School, they place their phone in their assigned Yonder pouch. They close and secure their pouch, keeping it with them throughout the day. When leaving school, students tap their pouch on an unlocking base to retrieve their phone. Yonder is used by millions of students every day across 26 countries. Our school partners report having more teaching time in the classroom, improved student safety and wellness, better student engagement, student behavior, and academic performance. Creating phone-free schools is a community initiative. Our comprehensive program provides support to our school partners from start to finish with step-by-step guidance, parent communication materials, policy development, and proven expertise to ensure everyone understands the difference a phone-free education can make.
It's amazing to see kids come to school and not have to worry about that phone going off or them being bullied by someone else on social media.
It was kind of annoying at first, but then I saw like the difference between like my old school and this school. I see more people like interacting rather than being on their phones, like especially at lunchtime and break time. They are way more engaged, everyone's happier.
It's night and day. I saw kids' faces again.
All right, so that's just a little information about it. Obviously, this would be a very dramatic shift if we were to join this pilot program, so there would be a lot of partnership that we would need to do, a lot of information that we would need to put out to parents and community members and kids, and obviously a lot of support for our teachers and our administrators on exactly what procedures we would want to move forward with it. But like I said, this was an opportunity, and I felt like it was too big to make the decision myself, and ultimately I really wanted to work with with you guys on trying to get an idea on what you all think with it. I've already talked a little bit about the partnership. They do have a lot of support, a lot of very positive experiences with them, even though we don't know of any districts in Florida that have done it, or at the Florida level. At Florida, it has been more kind of seen in some certain charter schools that are in more South Florida, but I know that question is going to come. So phone-free equipment, pouches, unlocking bases, and handheld magnets, as you can see how that happened, training and support, and then curriculum resources as well. Obviously, the claims are the good things go up, the bad things go down. So, those are obviously, we're all working to try to provide solutions and answers and help for students who are suffering with anxiety, depression, social alienation, cyberbullying, those sorts of things. Those are some of the many things that we're working with. They actually partner with Common Sense Media, which is a group that we've kind of worked through with some of our cell phone safety presentations in the past. Overall, the data kind of speaks for itself. Positive changes in engagement, safety and wellness, and overall academic performance as well. More data. This is the more academic side of things, where they've seen the biggest effect when it comes to overall student success rates, and then positive impact on behavior as well. Behavioral referrals. As a high school principal, I can't tell you how many times things would start over social media or through cell phones or things of that nature, whether it was bullying and harassment or just overall, hey, let's meet in the hallways, or let's go meet here, let's, ask your teacher for a pass, that sort of stuff. So overall, you've got a number of educator testimonials here, more energetic and positive, more books checked out in 1 week than all of last year combined. Discipline issues are down significantly by about a third, giving children back their youth. Students are talking to one another again, and pass rates in U.S. history went up substantially at that particular school. Overall, though, the planning and the community outreach, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little tentative on the timeline and getting all this ready to roll out for next school year. But they do support that, and obviously with the DOE behind it, it would be something that we would have a significant amount of support should we choose to move forward with this. Ultimately, it's about the kids, and that's what we have to make decisions with the kids in mind, and trying to help them, even if they don't necessarily see this as a help, but helping them focus on the right things while they're in our 14% of the time. So a couple of challenges. Now this is back to kind of Matt Boyack language again. This is no longer the Yonder pitch side of the presentation, but the rollout messaging I just mentioned, Yonder will support it, but it will require a major coordination to get this information out to parents should we choose to embark in the cell phone pilot program. The logistics of implementation and management. Obviously there's a lot of procedures that would need to take place. When would students lock phones? Would it be a part of their first period? Would it be a part of, second, third, fourth period? If they were a blended schedule, how would all of that look like? What would the unlocking of phones look like? What would, exemptions look like for students who have maybe medical needs or use assistive technology? All of those kind of things we would have to really start to think about here quickly. Changing the code of conduct in Neola policy. Currently, we allow it for use at lunch. If we were going to jump into this pilot program, we would need to stop the allowing of using cell phones during lunch. Again, this is only for the high school level. Future costs, if we decided to, expand this to the junior high level, or replacement pouches in future years when we were no longer in the pilot program. Ultimately, there's no perfect system. Kids are going to try to outsmart the system, utilizing dummy phones and pouches. I forgot my pouch, I lost or damaged pouches, medical exemptions, all of those sorts of things. We would know those things in advance, and we would have plans for each one of them as they came along. And then ultimately, the biggest kind of thing that you hear from parents when you bring these kind of things up is, I want to be able to contact my child in the event of an emergency. Well, we all know that in the event of a lockdown or anything along those lines, one of the worst things that we can have happen is 20 phones going off and kids talking on the phone rather than being following their lockdown procedures and those sorts of things. But then it comes down to, well, what if I need to send them home a different way, or what if I need to get them information about their job, or otherwise, those sorts of things. And those would be the questions that we would need to be prepared to answer. When I was in school, called the front office, they delivered the message, and we did things that way. But again, I just wanted to kind of bring this forward to you, not in any type of advocacy, but rather just, hey, this is an opportunity we've been approached with. Is this something that we are interested in moving forward with? And do you have any questions for me that I could kind of hopefully help answer based off of my limited knowledge of this?
So I'm thinking about our current policies, often in the backpack. High schools, after visiting a lot of schools this year, are the ones that have the biggest problem. And teachers complain, what are we going to do about other teachers that use their cell phone standing in the hall during class change, right? In general, I have watched a school, it was a private school, it wasn't super small, but I watched them. They did it during first period, and that last 5 minutes when people are packing up is when they turned them off. I don't know how a large district would do that. I think it's a phenomenal thing, because the biggest hurdle is you write a policy, but how do you make that policy happen when kids are so addicted to their cell phones, right? And so...
Well, at the high school level, obviously you have transitionary periods. So kids are changing from first period to second period to third period. And while there are teachers in the hallway, while there's admins in the hallway, you have a lot of unsupervised zones. You have bathrooms and stairwells and things of that nature that, it's like kind of a game of whack-a-mole when you're going over here and then the kids are going to go over there. And so it's just one of those situations that no system is perfect, and I wanted to make sure that, we didn't think that this was going to solve all of our problems, because honestly, some of it will create new problems. But ultimately, if we decided to move forward with this, it would be one of those things to where, they would hopefully, have the phone locked the minute they stepped on campus, and then, unlock towards the end of the day. And it wouldn't be a thing, well, I put it in my backpack first period, but as soon as I got out of first period, then I took it out of my backpack and, had that sort of
The
situation.
challenges can all be stopped by having very high expectations and actually following through. So if a kid would have a dummy phone, we have it's like when I asked you about locking doors, right?
Yeah.
The state helped set things to do, that expectation was set.
Yeah.
And it happened in Clay County.
Yeah.
So these challenges to me in Clay County is just about our expectation and actually having a discipline system that works.
Well, and I think in this situation, there's a lot less grace when it comes to consequences for cell phone violations, because then you would be intentionally defying the program that we have in place, and it wouldn't necessarily just be a spur of the moment poor decision. It would be an intentional act that you would discipline, in my opinion, a little harsher, but that would go to the code of conduct.
It would save a ton of time with teachers struggling. I know teachers that have 15 kids an hour, they're telling, sneaking on their cell phones, right? So.
Yeah, and it would take the pressure off of the kid in some respects as well, as far as, hey, I don't even have the option to go on it. So I got to get used to not being on it for a little bit. So cold turkey, so to speak. So.
I wanted to say that, I know you and I spoke a little bit on this, and I'd asked a couple questions, and everybody knows where I stand on this, because the majority of what they've discussed, I think we've already rehashed and talked about. I know Ms. Hanson and I had held a community forum where a lot of the parents came and had the same concerns, and our legislators have done an excellent job getting ahead of this. I think that when we're looking at something like this, and we're looking at whether it's convenience for parents or not, but we're ultimately looking at students and what's best for students, I think a push for this is a good idea. But because it is good for students, but on top of that, this takes away a lot of the responsibility of, okay, if I see a kid who has a cell phone, what am I supposed to do with it now? Because a huge complaint that teachers have is, I don't want to touch their belongings, I don't want to take it away, or another teacher is allowing the phone, but I don't allow it in my classroom, and to try to rein all of these students in, and I have, all these kids, it's too hard. So I think, with the support of principals in the district with this, I think that we would see positive changes in this. Because I'm telling you, I've talked to teachers, young and old. This is a major problem. Yes. I don't care what anyone says. Their two major concerns are vaping and cell phones, without a doubt. Doesn't matter their age at teaching. So all they do is they beg for help. And like you said, even though there's a state statute that prevents this, you can't stop it. You know, it's just not a real ban, if you will.
And the funny part is yesterday I got a call about a student complaining, our society we live in, about the teacher being on the phone all the time. So there you go. And so now I have to, reach out to the schools. But I personally would like to not even see the phone on school property, but that's not reality. I would like to hear from our administrators as far as if we do take it away at lunchtime, what that effect is going to be like.
I think when we heard feedback from them, it was the enforcement of taking the phones away at lunchtime that was difficult.
And I'd like to hear the volume, how much time do the high schoolers spend? What kind of effect are we gonna see and phone calls increase?
I think the other thing was they said it was quieter in the cafeteria with cell phone use, which would make sense.
I talked to the administrators from 3 junior highs, and and maybe Mr. Brodsky can expand, nothing but excitement about the fact that we asked them phones to be off and out of sight. And there are schools that literally put them off and against a wall like we used to during our, back in the day well, they probably still do with fast testing. The junior high people, I've had teachers call me and say, it's amazing the difference between our kids now and before when they had cell phones. So, like you said, there's challenges, right? But, and Mrs. Skipper's exactly right, when you meet with teachers, some are quitting over the disruption. You know where the disruption's coming from? The majority of the disruption's coming from behaviors and cell phones. It's all related, right? And as for teachers, Ms. Clark, I told this to a teacher the other day. They're on your team, you need to handle that. Like, if you want to follow policy and it's disruptive, and there's things that administrators can do to help with that too, I'm sure, if teachers are breaking the rules, But for the benefits that it provides for our kids,
So, Mr. Breck, this would be just for high schools? It's
Correct,
not
it would be just for high schools right now. There is no pilot program for junior high because they wrote it in the bill that it was flat out banned in elementary and junior high, but they want to see what the effects are because high school is a different beast. They want to see what the effects are at the high school level of having this in 6 counties.
Okay, so the funding, the cost is covered for just the first year?
So that's the question, right? Is we're still waiting on a state budget. So, as of right now, the intent was to have a fully funded pilot program. So, my thoughts would be getting an answer from you all and saying, yes, as long as it was fully funded, we're interested, or no, we are not interested at this time. So that's kind of where I'm looking. But yes, the cost on these, just so you know, for future years, and if we did want to expand, they are about $30 per pouch, and that comes with all of your everything else kind of included into that process. That comes with your unlocking devices, that comes with your support, that comes with those sorts of things. So it is a rather expensive proposition, which is part of the reason that, the pilot program appeals is that, if we could get these purchased from the state and, provide them with data on whether or not, we saw positive effects behaviorally or academically, then I thought it might be worth bringing up to you guys.
Does this fall under safety?
It's a great question, Ms. Hanson. It has fallen under safety.
Well, for me, it is a safety issue with kids. For me, it is, but I'm asking, for real.
No, I think that, when we started this process, Mr. Brodsky is adamant about how we could, make the enforcement of this better. When it comes to cell phone bans at the high school level, Ms. Pickett, Mr. Daly, and I sat down and we kind of started discussing this. And this was one of the ideas that came up. That was prior to us even knowing about the pilot program and the possibility of this being funded. So we're looking at trying to strengthen whether we go forward with this or whether we don't. It's not like we're going to just kind of throw our hands up and say, oh, well, we've got some other ideas in place as well. But like I said, to answer your question, kind of, because, there's a lot of disciplinary stuff that comes out of student cell phone use. So, obviously if cell phones were put away, and unreachable during the day, then I would posit that we would have a lot fewer behavioral issues for sure.
What would be our contractual obligation if we signed on for the pilot program? Like the financial commitment, the longevity of the contract?
So based on statute and just reading the statute, it looks like that, we would just be responsible to the Commissioner of Education for providing them with behavioral and academic data. I'm sure they are coming up with what they're going to want us to report on. I'm sure they're going to want to compare that to our current year data and determine whether or not, all the claims that Yonder it makes about academic success, we saw those in Clay County as well. But there is no, and I asked the Yonder rep that I was speaking with point blank, are there any additional costs that we would encumber as a result of this? And she said no, so long that, the funding for the pilot program not be cut. So then I would get with our attorneys and kind of put in there and say, hey, budget's tight. We're interested in doing this at the will of, the school board, superintendent, everybody, so long as there, is no additional cost to the district.
So we're not committing to multi-year contract?
No, right now it is a 1 year. It is a 1 year. We're going to pilot it. The deadlines are in the statute as far as, the Commissioner of Ed is supposed to present this to the legislature December of 26. We've got to provide them with data, I think it's by June or July of 26. And then that would be our commitment.
So Mr. Boyack,
Yes.
what do you need from us today?
I would love to hear some consensus as, yes, I'm interested in this, no, I'm not interested in this. Because what they're asking from me is to write a letter basically saying, hey, we're on board with this pilot program. Clay County is interested in exploring this as a district.
Okay, so what you're consenting to is yes to this, knowing that you're gonna also have to change our policy to match this pilot program. Okay, so can I get consensus from you, Ms. Hanson? Mr. Alvera? Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Gilhausen? So you have board consensus.
Okay, all right, I'll move forward with that and I'll provide you with updates along the way.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right.
So then let's talk timeline for the policy then, since we're changing the policy. It's also the code of conduct, so there's a lot to this. So I would think that we would want to, well, we might have to, let's see if it gets passed by the state first, right? Because everything's so in flux. You may need to call a special meeting for the purposes of this because the timing of publicly advertising the new policy on cell phones, the 28 days waiting, and then the vote, and trying to have that done before August, that gets a little tricky. But since we don't know if the state's going to pass the pilot, we're stuck in limbo. Everybody see the complication of this?
But either way, we said often in a backpack in our policy, so you have a plan for that?
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay, can we do like a special meeting before one of our budget, or one of our other
We
meetings
just have
or
to work
something?
out the details of that. I think we'll know whether or not it's gonna pass or not.
Should be.
So I would think we'd have to give as much notice to the parents of the high school students. I think that's gonna be key.
Exactly. Sir?
So let's look at the policy. I thought we had maybe inserted a catch-all in the policy that there's a state law change that kind of grandfathered us in. So that may save us as far as the timeline for making the policy change if we have that language inserted in there. We still need to notify the parents, but we may, as far as our statutory requirement for the notice of the change, we may be okay, but we have to look at our current policy. Because I think we inserted some language that there was a state, because we knew some of these bills were kind of pending.
But the state in their current legislation didn't go so far as to adopt a beginning bell to ending bell for the high school level.
Right.
Is not in the law. So now we would be adopting that as our policy. So it wouldn't be statutory, it would just be simply our policy.
If Yonder is doing this in 6 counties, would we necessarily be even chosen? Or we would?
Yeah.
So that's a great question, and one of the ones I asked as well, because I asked, what is your timeline on wanting these letters and those sorts of things? And obviously they want the letter in hand so that they can, have their 6 districts, but I spoke with her on Friday, and, she was requesting a letter soon, so with the will of the board here today, I can get that sent to her before the end of the day.
All right, so we'll just work out logistics later on the.
So the board would like us to submit the letter, just to be clear.
Correct. And that board can, and if the letter's submitted, to go ahead and change the policy, so we'll have to.
Good morning, board members, Mr. Broski. Wanted to come to you today with some transportation updates. To say it's been a fun year. It's been very productive, very crazy, very fun. Lots of things coming at us in 5 million different directions, as you all know, all too well. So a couple of things wanted to come with you today is kind of discuss some upcoming changes, look at it from a perspective too to get your support on, let you know some things that parents are going to be coming, I'm going to say, at you with some questions. So I want to make sure that you were ready to jump on those questions when they arise. Whoops, I got
It's a little delayed.
There we go. All right, so some of the things we wanted to discuss, funding for transportation, ridership, some policy changes, registering for transportation, and some transportation updates. We got a lot of good things that are coming our way in the world of transportation too with our buses, and also to just some important changes too coming forth with our ridership and policy as well. One of the things I hear throughout the district too is that student enrollment as far as the school level is down. Obviously, we know that from a transportation piece. The weird aspect of transportation is our ridership has actually been up, and it continues to go up on that side. So weird turn of events on that side. I contribute that. Parents are going back into the workforce. They're no longer remote employees anymore. They're needing that ride to and from school at that point as well. Some folks that were stay-at-home parents are no longer stay-at-home parents anymore. We get parents that call us all the time enrolling their students, and that is often the question that I'll ask them, hey, what's going on? You know, why the need now for transportation? Your kid's been going, or hasn't been riding for many, many years, all of a sudden they're riding. The common answer to that is they're back into the workforce, they're back into, or coming out of a remote situation, or just they're having to work. So we're close to about 15,000 riders that we transport daily. One of the pieces that is important to notate too, just from, I want to use that B word of budget. We don't like to say that here lately. I think we're all cringing. But the state funding for student transportation, we only receive funding for FTE for students living 2 miles or more from the school. So it's important to notate anyone that is within that, unless they hold certain criteria, we don't receive funds for those. Kind of pursuant to the Florida Administrative Code, going into detail there, a reasonable walking distance for any student who is not otherwise eligible for student transportation pursuant to section 1011.68 is any distance not more than 2 miles between the home and the school. So we got to make sure we're notating that. We're not getting any funding for these students that are within that side of it. So I wanted to kind of go into detail what that looks like. This is a topic we don't talk about much. We route a lot of students, close to 15,000, and we don't go over the detail on this side. But CCDS riders, these are the folks between 0 to 2. We do get funding for these students if they have the following. So it's important to notate. If they have an IEP plan that's attached to it, special transportation is marked. At that point, we do get funding for those. Temporarily disabled students. These are students that might all of a sudden have crutches, that have to get help up and down off the buses, or just have some other disability. Those students are generally marked with a 504. We then classify them for funding. Those kids get funding as well. Hazardous walking conditions. This is an important one. Transportation, we have a team that we actually go out for every single hazard that is marked throughout the district. We have a team that goes out, we walk it. We have criteria that is met by the state to deem it whether or not it's going to be a hazard or whether or not it actually applies within that walking distance side of it. Again, there's a form. I don't mind sharing that with you guys too, because I know you're probably going to get a lot of questions coming up in the upcoming, I'll say the summertime. We'll make sure you've got it so you can look at that too whenever those questions do hit your plate. But again, we walk those. We have a team that goes out and ensures that it does meet the state definition, and then we get audited for that too every single year. This is the big one that I want you guys to be aware about, is the courtesy ridership that we currently have. We currently have 960 students that are elementary, 58 junior high students, 240 high school students, totaling 1,258. Folks, this is equivalent to 13 buses, and it's roughly around $650,000 in missed funding. So when we get down to the nitty-gritty in funding and the world of the budget side, we've got to look at this. We've also got to look at this from an aspect too of our busing situation. The manufacturers are not popping buses out like they used to. It's taking us anywhere from a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years to get buses to the compound. Now, while we were extremely lucky this last year to get new buses, we also had an increase of ridership. Those new buses, no more than they hit my compound, they went out the door and had a driver in the seat. So with this said too, if we don't bring some attention to this in the 2-mile rule, we're not going to have buses for this upcoming year. We're going to be very, very tight. We're going to be looking at the DB word, and that's not David Broski, that's double back. I don't like to say that, but in a world of where we're at, if we continue getting the ridership that we get, we're going to be looking at forced double backs. So in a world of, I'm going to say funding, we get funding for the students that we currently have that we're going to be forcing those double backs on. The students that are within that 2 miles, we're not going to be getting funding for those, and that's going to be the calls for those double backs. I've got certain areas that we go into, neighborhoods in Oakleaf, that I've got 5 buses that go into one neighborhood. They pick up students, take them straight to the school. Yes, ma'am.
When you say the 2-mile rule, is that 2 miles as the bird flies, or is that 2 miles like walking path to school?
So that's going to be the walking path, the distance of it. So every school is going to have a different walking path that's deemed. It just depends on what the school is, where the front is considered for that school side.
Okay.
We also look at it too from that hazard walking side too, which way is going to be easier for the student to get to the school. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So, as people know, the young children down 218 don't have a sidewalk now. Is that hazardous to have like 5-year-olds walking alongside 218 without a sidewalk?
So there's definitions that have to be met to deem it a hazard. If there is ample room that is on the side of the road, then it wouldn't be deemed a hazard on that side. So it depends on if they're crossing, it depends on if there's a cross section, how many vehicles travel that road, the miles per hour on the road too as well. I can tell you that particular section does not meet the state statute of a hazard.
So like mostly log trucks going 55 miles an hour doesn't...
Yeah. If there's enough room on the side for the student to walk
Are we trying
safely,
to get a
that's a
sidewalk?
different story.
Who does that? The city?
County.
Yeah, it's my understanding Betsy Conlon is working on it.
Yeah. I do, that one's been literally that one's in my inbox,
I mean,
say
if you see him
multiple
walking
times.
there in the morning, then it's bad.
It is one that's in the works. I know I've specifically talked to the county on it a couple of times too as well, and the administration too at those schools too as well. It's been a hot topic with them. Couple other things. Skipper, do you have a question?
I did. Well, so would Blanding Boulevard, because it has a crosswalk, that's not considered hazardous? So anything that has like a
monitored
Okay.
monitored crosswalk. That's railroad crossings including too. If it's monitored and the arms actually are lowered down, it's considered a monitored area. So even with that too, if there's a crosswalk that the student can press and activate and cross across safely, then that's not going to be deemed a hazard for the state. We're not the only district. We're actually one of the I'm going to say the last districts on that side that has implemented this in a funding aspect. Just to name a few: Putnam, St. John's, Alachua, Pinellas, Orange, Hillsborough, Sarasota, Putnam. Just to name a few. I can share that with you too as well, as far as just the majority of the states. You can kind of see where those fall into play. We're one of the last ones, and I can tell you too, I do a lot of, and this is a customer service realm of things too. I have parents that will call me and say, hey, we've had a death in the family, we're doing this, I need temporary bus pass for this student. We grant those if we have the seat available. We will continue to grant those if we have seats available. What we can't continue to do is these going into the neighborhoods where there's ample crosswalks, there's ample sidewalks, and these students can travel to and from, and missing out on funding such as $650,000 a year. That's one that I'm going to say, as we continue to grow, every year is going to continue to elevate on that side. We're going to get more ridership in. These within 2 miles, most of these neighborhoods are growing. They're popping in. We all know that all too well. So it's items, it's happening, it's here, it's within us. If we want to look at it from a perspective, if we don't bring some attention to it, those 13 buses are going to hold double backs. That's also staffing too. In a world of staffing right now, it's been a tough year with that. We've had a lot of folks that have retired. In my world, we have had a lot of, I'm gonna say, folks that are, I call them toe stubbers in the internet essence. They get a job, they come back out, and they're with us for a little bit, but then they're out on FML or workers' comp or something to that extent. I'm staffed to an extent, but I've got a lot of folks that are out on FML, a lot of folks that are out on workers' comp, which is a struggle. So the substitutes that we hired at the beginning of the year, they have been in a full-time bus driving position the whole entire year. So it has been a struggle on that side. Those 13 drivers that are in those buses right now, we're going to need those folks at the beginning of the year. So it's going to be something I need your help on. I need your help in the avenue of coming up with a solution for it. And this is the solution from transportation that we're unfortunately having to look at and get a pretty good aspect of it. So the policy proposal, currently it is the 1.5. We're looking to change that to students living within 2 miles of school, maybe provided district bus transportation under the following conditions. Obviously, permanently disabled students, students with IEPs, temporarily disabled students, and students walking routes to school that meet the state criteria for hazardous walking conditions. And again, I want to emphasize, this is going to allow us a lot of flexibility for bus availability, staffing, and the funding side of it. It's tight in that world, but I don't foresee getting the new buses until mid of this upcoming school year, if they actually produce and get out on the line. And again, the staffing piece has been a challenge. We've got some that are upcoming in this summer training course, but it's not what we've had in the past. We have sincerely struggled this year with getting drivers in the seat. Our trainers are there, they're ready to roll, but the folks are just not available. They're not coming in like they have in years past. So we've got to look at that 13 plus buses that are going to be there and look at those drivers to be able to put them in. Double backs are the #1 item that I get phone calls for as far as transportation goes, and I know they boil down to you guys too as well. But it's one that parents call in on. We've tried to keep things running on time. When we select our double backs, we put them in an area to where it's going to be very minimal, less than 10 minutes, sometimes as great as 15. I can't guarantee that every single time we do it, but in a world of it, they're generally somewhere late between 10 to 15 minutes, give or take. Those 13, though, will help us out with that at the beginning of the year and be able to route those properly. So the more positive side of things is the change we do have coming. I wanted you guys to know that with this, obviously, it's going to implement a couple of different things, but our transportation eligibility will be on our website. Parents can go on there and they can see whether or not they'll be eligible for transportation. If and when we do decide to move forward with this, that will allow us to give them that flexibility to view that. They will be able to put their address in, and it will tell them whether or not they can ride a bus. So if they are within that walking zone and whatever detail that looks like. One of the things we've improved to this year is the ability for parents to opt in or opt out of transportation. If they feel too that they need a hazard deemed in their neighborhood, they can also send that to us electronically now. They don't have to go through the dog and pony show of having to go call the transportation office, call the county. They can submit that form to us and then we can take it from there. A lot of times too, that'll mean when we get this form, we can quickly look and say, hey, this has been deemed a hazard, and we don't have to go through that long process of a hazard request. So I kind of wanted to give you just some updates too. We have had Here Comes the Bus for quite some time now. I think everyone has had a love-hate relationship with it. This particular one, we're looking to kind of bring our software together, and that is with Bus Planner. Bus Planner is our routing software that's currently existing right now. We have done really well with Bus Planner, so we want to bring in Chipmunk, which is Bus Planner's bus app. Instead of having 2 different software companies, we'll have one. So instead of at night, the system's having to communicate with each other and do an upload, it will automatically be uploaded throughout the day. Parents will get live notifications. One of the really cool things about this one too is that if it's an ESE bus and that parent decides their kid's not riding, they can quickly send a message to my dispatch office and that dispatcher can change that route that morning versus having to go through the long drawn out process of calling dispatch. Maybe the dispatcher's on the phone, maybe they're not able to answer it, and then we send that bus out there for no reason. So this messaging app will be available for ESE students, regular ed students, pretty well anyone. They can communicate directly with our dispatch office. Let's say we have a severe weather warning or something to that extent, or just a route has changed. Bus planner, we can send that directly out from our dispatch team, and the parents get it live on their phone. It's like an SMS notification, and if you have the app on there, it'll just pop up on the app. And again, the messaging piece can come through on that side. A lot of times the buses, they will go down as far as breaking down. This will also tell them if we substitute that bus, and if we have to do double backs or double ups, it will also give them the capabilities of seeing what bus number they changed to. As it stands right now, my dispatch team, which is two folks, they have to send this out manually through the robocall system, which is very, very, very much a pain in the rear end. And it's just for 2 folks that are in there too as well. So this will simplify matters extremely and get our communication back up to par with our team and our parents.
Mr. Crawford, can I just
Yes,
say
ma'am.
something? Thank you for this, because I know some of us have complained about communication and about how we have multiple different apps doing multiple different things, and that was one of the biggest complaints with parents. So I just want to say thank you for this, because not only have you made it easier for parents to communicate, you made it easier for just a one app sort of thing. Like they can do all of it in one thing, and it helps us on the district and hopefully cost side of things.
Absolutely.
I wanted to point that out because there are so many people who take care of kids that are not their parents and their grandparents, and everything's all electronic, and I know sometimes staffing's an issue with calling in and saying, hey, where's the bus or that or whatever. You just made it 10 times easier, so thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
It really will help in the world of communication. That is our goal. I mean, unfortunately, in a staffing aspect, we don't have a lot of folks there in transportation for the dispatch team, but this will help out tremendously. And the driver gets to drive a lot of that too from the seat in their tablet. Going to the next, this will go out to parents here shortly in the next couple of days, letting them know that we need to download the app. In the app too, it'll make it a very simplistic way. The opt-in feature, which basically allows transportation to go from routing almost 36,000 students to down to that 15,000 figure. This will help us be able to route just those students in general. So if when the parent gets it, they'll have that option to go into their app. There'll be one little form that says opt-in, and it's almost like a check yes or no aspect. We immediately get that from our team side, and then we can actually start routing those over the summer versus waiting for that huge upload to come into our department.
So will that help? Because I know your funding comes in a form of person in a seat, kid in a seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is that what you're trying to do, eliminate all the seats that kids sometimes show up and then we don't get funding?
So I have a bus in general, and this sounds really odd, but her route, she serves Discovery Oaks Elementary. It is a very populated neighborhood. She goes into that neighborhood. Her route has almost 160 kids enrolled to her bus. Now, obviously, this is not a triple decker. This is a regular bus. But that goes to show you we don't know if those kids are going to ride, or are they riding, or are they not riding? So with that world of things too, the way the routing goes, this bus is assigned to this neighborhood, and technically it's 160 plus students that are enrolled for this particular bus. We know that 160 kids don't ride, but on average this particular bus holds anywhere from 55 to 60 elementary kids, but yet there's this many that are enrolled. So this will allow us to fix that. This will allow us to go in and say, okay, hey, this particular bus scanned on 65 kids. We know these kids are enrolled. We know these kids are going to be riding on a day-to-day basis. So it helps us with that funding side too. I'm going to be honest with you, here in the last couple of years, we went from the paper and pen method. drivers had a sheet of paper that they did a check off for their FEFP figures. This will allow us to go electronic on that too. When the kid gets on the bus, they get scanned on, versus them having to, at the end of the day, go through and do a check-off system with them. So let's be honest, the driver is doing that check-off system in the seat of the bus, which means that there's a lot of things coming at them on the day-to-day basis too. Them scanning on and off the bus will allow us to capture additional funding. Just the pilot method that we did last year, we increased, it was about 12%, give or take, increasing our student counts that come through. So we've already seen that increase come about. Whenever this new school year rolls around, I'm pretty excited to see what those changes will be and just what our FEF figures will be for upcoming years. So again, parents will get this in the upcoming days. We will ask them to opt in, which will allow us to properly route students. Some other important pieces too, our bus drivers have been needing some updated tablets. We are getting those new tablets installed on the buses this year. One of the things that CalAmp, our old GPS system, one of the problems, drivers would always say the GPS doesn't work properly. I don't know if you guys have ever got a complaint on that side of it, but with these tablets, the GPS platform will change. It'll go from CalAmp to Bus Planner, which means there's not that communication issue that we've had over in the past. So the driver's going to get a new updated tablet. They can actually see it a whole lot better too. The tablet they currently have is very small. This one, it brightens the aspect of it, gives them a clearer view. And again, we're not waiting for that upload to happen. So when we make a route change in the dispatch office, the driver instantly sees it. They can also too, if they're doing a field trip, they can use this as a mechanism too to give them the directions to go from point A to point B. So it increases safety on that side. They're not pulling their phone out or trying to navigate with that phone. It'll give them that option to use that platform within the device. Last but not least, they're getting new student scanners too to update with our badges. So this whole system will be new to them this upcoming summer. They'll train on that. And again, our goal here is to make it go a little bit faster. Our current scanners, whenever we have a heavy loaded stop, generally there's anywhere from 45 to 50 kids coming in on a neighborhood stop. It takes them a while to scan these students on. We actually had about 60 drivers the other day use their badge. We had them all lined up like they were boarding the bus. It was a real quick, swift process. The new scanners, they work really fast. The students can actually do it themselves when they get on the bus. So it simplifies the process extremely. So we're looking forward to that change and popping that out for the upcoming school year. Any questions on the 2-mile rule?
I'm okay with that. My concern is can we please talk to the county commission with 218? My family lives on the east side of 218, and up until recently there wasn't really a sidewalk. There still isn't. And if I were to go to school from my mom's house, I'd have to walk to the junior high, and there's been 5 deaths right around
Bicycles.
her house. And granted, she lives kind of like on a curve, but I think about my 5 and 7-year-old walking to school on a 60 mile an hour that they don't, it's 55 actually, but they treat it like the Autobahn, like it's like 70 plus sometimes. That's the only thing that I have concern with. I know like in neighborhoods, they have, it's a lot slower speed, whether people abide by that or not. But I just worry about 218 on both ends for that reason. So if we can maybe emphasize to the county that we are moving this way, that maybe nothing is fast in government, but emphasize the importance of it, just because my concern is I know how that road is.
But it's more than that, because the majority of unpaved roads, so I'm talking about bumpy dirt, sliding roads, people slide off all the time because of the sand on the roads, are in my district, right? There's not a sidewalk within 4 miles of my house. Kids are forced to walk on the road. And now we're going to have little kids, and it's not your fault, and I understand that. But this is the first time in my life I feel almost panicked, because these are like we got 3-year-old programs, 4-year-old programs, kindergartners walking 2 miles where there's not a sidewalk in sight. I mean, I don't know if there's something we can do about that. I know we can't change the legislation, right? But this is a place where there's dubious characters, no sidewalks, unpaved roads. 218 is such a bad highway. 4 people were killed on Dolphin and 218 crossing on a bike in the last year. It's so bad, they're actually trying to make it 4 lanes. So I feel like there is something we ought to be able to do with this county to at least give one walkway. You know how they used to do that? We're gonna give a sidewalk from this area, and the kids could cut over to that area and walk on a, I don't know.
And I will tell you, we have been in conversations and meetings with the county where we've talked about these different areas. 218 was brought up, and they're working on, I know, one of those yellow flashing lights for pedestrians. There's one there now. I think they were looking at other areas to do that as well. So yeah, they're definitely aware of it, and we have been in discussions with them, but we will let them know about our 2-mile, change and see if, they can continue helping us.
I mean, for the most part, I mean, I would never let my kids do that. I personally, but there are certain times where like parents just can't help it. I mean, it's either put food on the table. I mean, I get it. I also understand I wouldn't let my 5 and 7-year-old do that on 218. We have to advocate for all parents, and that would be my only concern is if we could emphasize to the county, the importance of this, and this is the direction that we're moving.
Well, and I'll say this, so this is just to put us in accordance with Florida statutes. Now, Randall does a very good job after the first 2 weeks of school to say like, hey, let's see how things shake out. If there's space on a bus and we know it's not gonna be a full bus, and he's like, yeah, I can, pick this kid up, on the way, they're on the way, he'll do that. Him and his team will do that.
And I guess there's
this
kind of
isn't
one
to
way
say,
to-
no, you cannot, anybody under 2 miles cannot be a courtesy rider, but changing the policy just gives us that flexibility for times like this with staffing and bus availability to let us do that.
And I think this could also be an opportunity, and we've
Yeah.
talked in the past about, how can our parent-teacher organizations assist our schools. I know, like, my kids go to a school where there's no transportation provided. So, like, the parent page will coordinate carpool options for families who need it. So there could be some creative solutions that we could look to our parents who are able to transport their kids back and forth to help those parents who can't.
And I guess there's no way that, because they're Title I schools, that can't help us either, like helping kids get there.
I think with funding, it just depends on that side, but no, we will continue to do these hazards. The hazards will communicate with the county level too, so they will get copies of all these too as it moves forward now, so.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to you, because when I was first on the board, it seemed like half the complaints were regarding buses. But when you came on board, things changed. And we truly value you for what you do. And I think it was the first of this year, it may have been last year, because I went out to 218 and stood when school ended, and I watched what happened. I watched no sidewalks, the crossing, but every one of the bus drivers said, hey, instead of letting little Johnny cross the walk, they'd be happy, they looked out for their safety, because they had room on the bus. They just didn't want to take the full ride and wait to come back to exit on the other side of 218, but they were very, very helpful, and of course I was able to call Patrick at CCSO and got that pedestrian walk, and it's up and it's running, and at least we've got something. But yeah, that area is pretty wide as far as walking.
And no, too, we're not saying this is going to get rid of our customer service aspect. That's there to stay. That won't go away as far as my department goes.
But I know
we will
the county
continue doing
was
that.
working on the sidewalk since I was out there. We've been discussing it. We probably just need to beat on it more to see what the time frame is going to be.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Before we move on, if we can get consensus from the board to change the policy This is 8,600 on transportation, so just as a reminder, the only thing that's really changing in the policy puts us in compliance with the current Florida statute, which is 2 miles. So we can,
Ms. Gilhousen?
Is that, we're giving consent to put it on the regular agenda for a vote?
yes, we have to start the process, just like there was 4 policies that are not in the same time frame as the other 500 plus.
Right.
Yeah.
This would become one of those that would not be in the same. It would go to 5 that are
So
not
this
in
is
the
just
same.
consent to begin the process? to take the
Yes.
policy, Yeah, I'm good with that.
Ms. Hanson?
I'm not happy, but I'm a yes.
Mr. Alvaro? Okay, and that would be board majority, but we can
Yep,
ask Ms.
so 8,600, so we'll.
It's just
We'll look at
1.5 to 2, right?
Yeah.
That's
I'm sorry?
The 1.5 to 2.
And I'm gonna read what it says. Students living within, and it was 1.5 miles, now that's struck. 2 miles, the school may be provided district bus transportation under the following conditions, and those conditions did not change. The addition is in accordance with Florida statute 1011.68.
Can I have a copy?
Do you have that? Okay, thank you.
Ms. Clark, are you okay with them adding 2 miles to the?
Yes.
So you have board consent. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Are you guys good on that, to Ms. Pickett?
Ready? I'm ready.
Okay.
All right. All right, so, Board and Mr. Brodsky, first of all, happy post-graduation weekend. I hope everybody had a wonderful graduation on Friday night. So, we all had a couple with CVA and then our high schools. And don't forget, we have Elevation tonight at 5 o'clock at Fleming Island High School for anyone that's interested in that. So, got to shout out my graduations. So today what I want to do is give you some information on what we're calling the Oakleaf Success Center. And I'll give you a little background information, make it quick, I know we're all a little tired. So currently, in our current structure for alternative placements, if a student has to have an alternative placement, with our current setup, any student K-6 goes to Ames. Any student 7 through 12 goes to Bannerman. That's how it works currently. But, I have to throw a little wrench in here. Remember, this upcoming year, we're going to have 6th graders at the elementary, and we're going to have 6th graders at the junior high. So we had to think, what do we want to do with that situation? That is not what I wanted to do with that. So here's what we have created, an idea of having a 6th grade Oakleaf Success Center for 6th graders only that need an alternative placement. Ms. Dixon back there is agreed with this, and Mr. Stafey has gone over this. Because what we didn't want to do was to send a 6th grader that goes to elementary and have to create Bannerman 6th grade. So now 6th grade from elementary is going to Bannerman. That didn't sound very good. But likewise, we didn't want to send a junior high 6th grader back to Ames, back with the elementary. So what could we do with the 6th graders that might need an alternative placement? So an Oakleaf Success Center is what we've created, and that's where our 6th graders, no matter if they're elementary or junior high, will go if an alternative placement is needed. Because we feel like the elementary parents will be comfortable because we have 6th graders in junior high. And so remember, most of the districts in the state have the model of 6th grade and up as secondary. So we're just moving to that area. So we needed something for those 6th graders. Traditionally, it's only been about 10 6th graders over the last 3 years
each year that have needed an alternative placement. But we did need somewhere for them to go. So the idea is that we will create the Oak Leaf Success Center at Oak Leaf Junior High, where these students will continue to learn to organize, achieve, and progress. We'll facilitate student achievement and behavioral success through this structured environment, much like we do either at Ames or at Bannerman. And remember, this is only for the students that are in 6th grade, no matter if it's junior high or elementary. You may ask, why Oak Leaf? That seems like such a long way. Well, Mr. Bremmett provided me with a little scatter plot here so that you could see in our north 2 quadrants are where most of our students are located anyway. So Oak Leaf area really isn't that far for most of our students. So that doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue there. We already have a vacant portable there that has the hookups for bathroom and water. So we use one of the vacant portables that are left. We'll put some carrels in there, the old carrels that you might remember, so that we can create the classroom there. I've already checked with Mr. Crawford. He actually said since it will be the junior high timing, busing shouldn't be a problem because it's the last route of each day, each morning. So that actually worked out best for him. Again, we'll serve the students in 6th grade. If it's an elementary, generally those are 45-day placements. And so the 6th grade, the schools will send the work and we'll provide that work. If it's a longer placement, then we'll do the same strategies that we do at Bannerman, where the students follow the current curriculum guide. Students will complete the individualized program goals, and we'll work on behavior modifications and things to help them when they return back to their school, same as we do with Ames and at Bannerman. The district placement will follow the current process, and I've, like I said, conferred with Mr. Stafey and Ms. Jones that this would be a very easy process. We only need 1 teacher and 1 general classroom aide. Just hopefully we'll stay with the 10 average or lower would be nice. We'll have the teacher that will provide the unique skills as well as social skill practices, and also ensuring the rigor of their curriculum. Because we're already at Oak Leaf Junior, then Ms. Dixon has agreed to share some of her support, such as support facilitation, that she already has on campus. So anything that we need there, she will already provide and be in support of that. And then obviously we want to continue to increase academic achievement and offer specially designed instruction if needed, high leverage practices. And then we want to make sure that we enhance the student accountability and improving behavior and social skills so that these students can return back to their home school and be successful. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. If it's regarding the location, then Ms. Dixon can help answer any questions. And if it's the process, then Mr. Stafey or Ms. Jones can handle any questions.
What happens if we don't have any kids?
Well, then that person can support Oak Leaf Junior, because I'm sure they could definitely use that. Mr. Stafey, do you have any? He may have some that are already. Go ahead.
I have 1 potential student to start off the year for next year at this time.
There you go. And unfortunately, we have 1 person. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
All right, Mr. Brodsky.
So if we could, Bonnie, if we can go to the budget presentation first, and then we'll work our way back.
Oh, yeah.
So I got two items that are left. One is the review of the whole agenda, the other one's the budget. Quite frankly, the budget's more important, so I kind of switched them around. given the time frame that we have and where we're at, okay? So once Bonnie puts that up, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So, you know, when you look at the budget, there's a couple ways to look at it. One, just want to point out that this is not a 24-25 budget that I'm talking about. It's the 25-26 budget. It's next year's budget. Okay.
It's coming.
It's coming, okay. Throw her off, switching up the time frame.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay, so again, this year, 24-25, the current budget, we're going to end the year with a 3 to 5% fund balance. We'll meet all of our financial and legal obligations for it. So in other words, we did what we said we were going to do in 24-25. Did have one question, why 3 to 5%? And that's simply because we still have May and June to finish to wrap up our books. May is the most expensive month in the district because summer paychecks are paid during that time frame. So the issue that I'm speaking about today is not 24-25, it's moving forward into the 25-26 budget. And that's of concern. So again, just kind of brief reminders, and for anybody that may be listening out there, you know, you're talking about budget, you're talking about revenue and expenditures, and obviously your revenue has to be more than your expenditures. So just like at home, if your bills are more than the amount of money you make, that's not a good position to be in. Obviously, you want to spend less than what you make, right, or at least equal. Also, I think most people don't realize that funding, actually 71% of our funding comes from the state, 28% comes from local area taxes, and then 1% comes from the federal government. So the huge makeup of our budget in Clay County Schools is directly from the state, right? So that creates a budgeting challenge given our current situation. Unfortunately, in the 25-26 year, as we're starting the budgeting process and the trim process, we do a general analysis of, are we spending more money than we are? And for 25-26, because of the obligations of where we're at now and some of the uncertainty, we are in fact there. We're now, I'm officially saying, and you saw this in other budgetary sheets, right now our expenditures, the costs that we have, are more than the money that we make. So it's the very situation, just like your house. When you make less than what you're spending, that's not a good position to be in. So when you look at this, the thing I wanted to illustrate by this graph, you can see revenue versus expenditures going all the way back to 2017. You can see how tight that is over time. Those lines, the green and the, is that pink?
Pink.
Okay, I'm going pink. The green and the pink, you can just see how those two lines are really, really close, but I want to point out to you that now expenditures going into 25-26 will be more than revenue. So the question would be why? Like, why is that? One, you have decreased revenue. You can see proration is the difference between the number of students projected and the number of students that actually show up physically in the school. So that's an automatic decrease in revenue. So this past year, that decrease was roughly $4 million in proration. The decreased add-on for FTEs that are projected for 25-26 is $2.9 million for that. And just in general, the uncertainty of not having a state budget for 25-26 makes it very difficult to budget, right? If you don't know what the budget is going to be. So then you would have to use estimates as to what you believe the budget is going to be in projecting a new budget for 25-26. Kind of leaves you in a difficult spot. I've never seen this before, my 36 years. There was actually articles talking about, state government and maybe potentially not having a state budget at the end of June, even though it's mandated by the Constitution to be in place by July 1st. A great deal of uncertainty hangs around the school district.
Mr. Oski,
Yes.
the decreased enrollment, do you know, or can we get the information of where that is in the county?
We could, we do a statistical analysis, and one of the things that the district's become better at in the last, I'd say 14 months or so, is tracking all of that data, like where are students going, and viewing the district more through business principles than we've ever had before, because now what you're seeing happening is students are going to homeschool and they're going to other options that they have, which then leads to flexibility, a great deal of flux that goes into the system, which then accounts for differences. So if you look at a difference of about 500 students, you're looking at about $4 million just there. And I'm just getting started with the numbers now. The $4 million will seem relatively lower than some of the other things I'm about to tell you related to our budget. So once again, expenditures more than revenue, but most of the revenue comes from the state. That's a key part to remember. It comes from the state. Revenue is down. One of the things that you'd see happening is the use of vouchers is increased costs. So if you're looking at revenues going down, but costs are going up. Well, what costs are going up? Well, inflation is one. We would estimate 6 to 8 million is the additional cost to run the district for 1 year with 2.7% inflation. People will argue whether inflation's 2.7, some will say it's less than that, some will say it's more than that. But when you're factoring in a budget for next year, that you have to factor something. We went with 2.7 as our number to kind of get that, because everyone would agree the costs to do everything have gone up. And so it is what it is, and so that's an increased cost. When you look at the second bullet point, it's increased FRS costs, which are a result of legislation as to costs as well as benefits. You can see that's about 1.5 million, but the Florida Empowerment Scholarships or vouchers are perhaps the biggest change that you're going to see. So in 16, there's about a 14 million swing that you're going to see here on this chart, where you can see in 23-24 it's at 16, then it goes to 24, it's a swing of $8 million in a single year. The projection coming out of Tallahassee for this upcoming year is $30 million. Okay, $30 million, that's a swing, 2-year swing of $14 million. Then you add the 4, then you add the 6 to 8, then you add the 1.5, and you can kind of see increased cost, revenue decreasing. Okay, everybody hopefully gets the big picture. There's also additional mandates, whether it be ESE, mental health, safe schools. None of those are projected to go up. So that puts you in a real precarious position where you are spending more money, okay, and you're making less money. And that's kind of where we're at currently as a district. So then the question, well, why is this happening? Well, this is a whole Florida issue. I put up some headlines from some school districts across the state. You can read them, I'll read them to you. I think it was Alachua. I was watching their workshop in which they were looking at 15 million was the amount of money that they were looking for in Alachua County in their workshop. Typically, in the best case scenario, you would want to adjust your spending earlier, like in January, as you go through the allocation process and you do all of those things. You would want to do that. The difference between the House and the Senate in Clay County terms The House versus the Senate in Clay County terms is 25 million. That's a large swing between two legislative bodies as to the amount of money. All of that puts strain on the school system, but one that we have to take action in order to move forward. So the question would be, like, what have we done related to that? We've taken some pretty drastic steps in order to ensure that 25-26 goes well budgetarily. And most of these steps are designed to make sure that we protect our employees. We're an employee business. We have a lot of employees that work for us, over 5,000. So what steps have we taken? We reduced district budgets by 20%. Anybody that knows something about budgeting, when you see that number, you should probably swallow hard. 20% is a huge chunk. I think that we can get there, and again, trying to protect the organization itself and the people and the support that we provide students. You know, I feel like that's a number that we're going to have to reach. Next, we renegotiated district contracts. We looked at all contracts. We withheld contracts from the board. So, for example, there's various educational tools that we use in order to ensure success. We've kind of held those contracts back while we're waiting for a state budget and also making the adjustment, the overall adjustment to the budget itself. Okay, so there's a lot that goes into that because there's a lot of contracts that the district enters into. Next, we reevaluated all district programs for a return on investment. And this is kind of really simple. We looked at all of our programs to say, is the program itself able to sustain itself financially? In other words, does it make money? Does it lose money? Does it break even, etc.? So I'll give you an example that I shared. You know, one of the things that we did look at was FLYCA, which is Florida Youth Challenge, which is a program out there at Camp Landing. And so the question came up, like, what is the cost to run FLYCA versus the money that's generated from FLYCA to see if it's a financially beneficial or is it financially challenging to have that program. I chose that one because in the analysis of that, FLYCA actually does sustain and pay for itself in the process, right? But you could see, and the thing that I'm trying to bring to the board is just simply the idea of we're looking at everything. Quite frankly, we're looking at everything. Because you heard me throw out numbers like 6 to 8 in inflation, 1.5, 14 million swing, plus unfunded mandates. That is a lot for a district to overcome in a single year. So what else have we done? We have, we've paused travel. We don't think it's appropriate while we're re-examining our budget for folks to travel. Now, there are state meetings that people have to go to. For example, there's a literacy meeting in June. There's other things that are directly related to the business of the district where you're getting information from the state where if you didn't go, you're at a deficit because you still have to keep up with state legislation, state trends, and all those kinds of things to make adjustments over the summertime. So travel pause. We also had a hiring, stopped hiring. We had a hiring pause, primarily because the last strategy and the difference there, after we did all of that, right, we wound up reducing the difference between expenditures and revenue. 2/3 of it we were able to adjust doing those things. But the final third, the last roughly $10 million, we had to re-examine our allocations district-wide. So that's the very last thing that we're in the process of doing now and hope to complete very shortly would be how to look at all of our allocations. 82% of the district's budget is tied up in personnel costs. Let me just say this. we're going to do everything possible in order to ensure that the impact is as minimal as possible on our employees. And we've done that you can see from that example that I'm giving you there. So what happened and what are we doing related to allocations? One, the guiding principles for what I'm describing should be centered on students. Students are the reason why we exist. So number one, I kind of put that at the top of the little building blocks there. I guess those are building blocks, Kelly. Kelly's responsible for all graphics. You can see we're talking about prioritizing students in the classroom, which is the primary purpose for the organization. Then we looked at proportional reductions while protecting student programs, not eliminating any student programs, because students obviously benefit from those programs. And then minimize to the greatest extent possible any impact on our employees. So you can imagine this is quite the task in a organization that has well over 5,000 employees. So a couple other principles that we've used in doing this work is reducing district staff in a larger proportion than the school staff. You know, when looking at this, if the primary focus is students that are in the classroom, ensuring that they have the needs they need, then the district has to reduce at a larger proportion than the schools. That would make total sense. The next would be gathering, and that's actually a good example of, again, how we're prioritizing students in the classroom. The second bullet point there is about gathering information from schools and district leaders. So what we've done is we've reached out to each school and saw what allocations they could in fact reduce at their school. You know, I always say the principal and school leadership are the people that would know best, okay, as to what they can achieve and what they can't achieve at the school level. So their input matters greatly in a situation like this one, as well as the district leaders. So for schools, we determine individual school reductions using an equitable formula based on projected student enrollment, which, you know, like we said, enrollment is king when it comes to funding. That's how we generate funding. So how many students are enrolled at that school really does make a difference when doing this work. And then also considerations for ESE and special programs. They're not all the same, right? Then we prioritize the preservation of personnel, most directly tied to the core classroom instruction when we're looking at this. And the last bullet point is our goal is to place all affected personnel within the district. So when you look at it, we hire about 450 instructional people. I don't even know the total number when you add in support and others, but we hire quite a few people. So there are positions that folks that are affected can in fact move into. And of course the goal is to place all of those people in those positions. The board of course will go to the June 26th, is it? What day is it? 26th. Board meeting. All reappointments will be on the board agenda at that time as we do this work. So again, in kind of summary, when you look at the overall budget for 25-26, I kind of laid out just in very simplistic terms. We're spending more money than we're bringing in. There's a great deal of uncertainty in it. Could it be better? Could they pass a budget that's better? Yes, but they can. I mean, anything's possible. Can the district do nothing now and just hope that it works out in 25-26? Hope's not a plan. Hope's not a plan. So that's why we're taking the actions that we are. And the estimate, you know, in looking at this and doing the math on it is 0.04% of employees would have some sort of impact related to this in order to make the adjustment that we need to make. You know, I can just tell you, for me, and I think even Vicki Kidwell would agree with this, I care about our employees. Okay, we're gonna do everything we can to minimize the impact on our employees. But when 82% of your budget is in fact employees, and the state kind of hands you what they've handed us, we've got to take action in order to ensure that at the end of next year, we can be in as good a shape as we are at the end of this year and be able to meet all of our obligations at the end of the year. It's a whole year-long process. Will we, I really believe, and I think Ms. Troutman would agree with me, that at the end of this process and the adjustments that we need to make as a district, we'll still wind up hiring people at the end, but we need to make sure that all of our employees are taken care of first before we would do such a thing. Okay? Any questions from the board?
I would just be interested to see the 500 students, like where are they missing from?
Yeah, we can do that, like where the reductions are. And I think that, one of the things that I talked more about is the District 2 has to advertise and market. When I was talking about looking at a school district more in business terms, you have to actually market for people, which is probably new. But in the other side of that, when you take issue like vouchers and you take off any of the guardrails that were on that program, the guardrails would be the income of people receiving them, and through legislation, the guardrail of how much money a person makes, whether or not they would qualify for a voucher. Right now, under Florida law, you can be a multi-millionaire and receive funding for your child to go to private school. That's a fact. Okay? So when you see that, you would say, okay, if that's a direction, it's great, but you have to provide the funding for that to occur. That's really the challenge. When you don't provide the funding comes from somewhere. In this case, next year will be a total of $30 million that you're looking at. So it's a challenge, no doubt.
With the voucher program, in order for a family to receive that funding, does their child have to have been enrolled in Clay County School District?
No.
Right, and I know that, but I just wanted that, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You hear the language that the money follows the child, right?
Right.
Sometimes that's the case, but what we have seen and why it's so hard to predict is that sometimes the child has never been enrolled in the district, so that expenditure has never been accounted for. So it puts us in a really difficult position.
You're 100% correct. So this would be even children that have never stepped foot in Clay County schools ever in their lifetime would be receiving financial assistance through the state.
Which it would make more sense to me that if we want the tax dollars for education to follow the child, then the state would send that tax money to the families of school-age children. I don't know why it needs to come through our budget, because it makes it impossible for us to.
Isn't that?
That isn't, no, I don't think it's dead yet. That was in the Senate. I believe the Senate portion of that was talking about that. Makes it very difficult to plan a budget.
It needs to.
When you can see, like this year was an $8 million increase. Next year is predicted to be a 6. Notice key word, predicted by the state to be 6. Right? That leaves a lot of in the air. So I was reading a recent article that was talking about this was Texas and the Texas legislature, and it looks like they're passing a similar legislation, but they put a cap as to the amount of money that can be spent. So in Florida, when you add it all up, tax, title, and delivery, it's almost $5 billion spent on this program. And in Texas, new legislation has a $1 billion cap. Texas is bigger than Florida.
So I have a question.
So,
When will affected personnel and staff know and then at that time, every open job becomes available for them? I know we're going to hear questions. When's the approximate timeline for that?
So we hope to start that process here by the end of the week.
Okay.
So
that can be our answer, yeah.
So those actively doing interviews now, they're essentially on hiring freeze?
Correct. You would have to place individuals that are currently employed in the district into positions first before allowing outside candidates to.
So essentially, we're on a freeze for outside candidates, not internal, right? So like if a principal is wanting to fulfill one position and there's multiple inside people wanting to apply for that position and they've done interviews and whatever, they can still hire, or everything's on a freeze.
Is that phase one, isn't
Calls
it?
for transfers and
Yeah.
for that, so that we have time to look at the possible reductions. And because of all the certification issues, it's much more complicated with instructional because you have certification issues. So we felt it was best to pause everything, so to help ensure that we have more options to offer to those that are going to be affected.
Okay, because I'm already getting questions on some whose contracts were not renewed.
There's a lot of people who are not renewed yet, always, every year.
Right.
Probationary annual never go until now, administrators never go until now. There's a lot of people who haven't been renewed because they haven't fulfilled requirements, whether it's certification requirements, training requirements, a lot of different things along that line. They're out of field status, so none of those people would have been reappointed yet at this time. And it just gives us more options to look at to help people find something that's similar to what they're in. And
So we'll just say that everything's on a
it's paused.
freeze and that you guys are going to let them know by the end of this week?
Is it
Let
going
them know or finish the process?
We start the process here by the end of the week. It'll take a few days. There's a lot of employees.
Right, no, I understand. I'm just, when people, after we leave here, and our phone blows up, I just want to know what to be able to tell
Is it like going
people
back into phase
a
one again, where
timeframe.
you're only going to pick certain people?
Mr. Bresky.
Is it like that, like you have to be already transfers?
Well, it sounds to me you've got a 500 student shortfall, correct? So you're going to have to look at positions, what positions are going to need to go away.
Yeah.
And
Based on
then,
student need first.
correct.
I have a question, Mr. Bresky.
Yes, sir.
And then
So-
the hiring process could take place once you've evaluated what positions are available where.
So Human Resources has to follow contract and other obligations in order to do that. That process will take a few days to go through the process.
So when will the employees know? Like next
Hopefully
week?
very soon.
Before
That
they
was my question. No, I know when you're working on the process between now and whatever, but my question is going to be, when should they know something?
I thought you said the end of June is when we would have contracts, right?
That's what it would be on the board agenda for reappointments. All reappointments will be on the June.
So they
So
could
look
count
at
on for
June.
sure by the end of June.
Yes,
Okay,
for definite.
that's my.
So the last day for teachers is Monday?
Yes.
Sir, question?
We have a 500 student shortfall right now, and that's a considerable amount of money, right? Do we took into consideration that a lot of these courtesy riders that we have, 1,200 of them, some of them are in the public school system because of the ride, and they can even choose to leave the public school system if they have to walk or the parents have to take them to school.
Right,
And there will be a lot more money lost.
right. So really, the reminder I give about the transportation presentation is that is only between 1.5 and 2, not students that were over 2 always had always had bus transportation. We're only talking about that targeted group between 1.5 and 2.
What's the amount of students in between 1.5 and 2?
About 1,200, I think, was what's
That's what I'm
estimated.
saying, 1,200 students is equivalent to $10 million if all of them decided that we don't have transportation, we're gonna walk, my father is gonna take me to school, I'm going to a private school or something. And that money is gonna leave the school system.
They would still have to provide transportation.
80 students is equivalent to $650,000. That's exactly the amount they're saving by not transporting those 80 students alone leaving will be $650,000.
I think that's kind of an unknown. You can't really know what a family's going to do in that situation. It's a risk for sure, but it's,
Yeah, only 80 will be the equivalent to what we're saving. So 1,200, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get pretty close to that amount.
Right.
If they're counting on the schools to provide transportation.
well, for a family who would require transportation, really their only option would then be homeschool, right? If they're either going to go to public school or they're gonna homeschool if mom and dad can't get them to school, right?
Or let's see, if they have to work. If they have to work, they can.
Right, but I'm talking about for the loss of funding. So you'd be, that's why I would be interested, those 500 students that we're missing, where are they coming from, and do we know, or is it because they're going homeschool, or are they going private school? If there's a way for us to
A lot of them
know
are
that.
gonna walk to private schools, because there's not, I mean, most private schools in the areas that we're discussing, there's not really a private school right now. And walking, it would be actually closer for them to walk to their designated public school than their private school.
They open a new one too, when somebody's opening a new charter school, I don't know where they're at.
So as unfortunate it is, this is one thing I really had to learn is we have to really just operate within the law. And it's not always comfortable to operate there, and it's terrible for some.
I'm not saying they're not operating, I'm trying not to lose the money,
Right.
actually. I'm trying to keep the money within our schools instead of leaving.
But to your point,
Yeah.
that's an unknown. Would you lose money still? Possibly. You know, like we can't know what these families might or might not do. What we can make a decision on is the numbers that we do know. And we know for sure that transporting those 1,200 students is taking $650,000 out of our budget that we don't have right now. And on top of that, the 13 buses, the bus drivers that go with them, you know, there are solid things that we can base that decision on instead of trying to base it on a projection that's kind of an unknown as far as what those families might or might not do. But we make a decision, we see how it goes this year. If we lose a bunch of students, maybe we do something different the following year. You know, like we've talked about in the past, there's always room and reason to bring things back up again. But I don't think this would be something we could base that decision on.
Take it into consideration, at least.
For sure, definitely something to monitor as we go through this year, I think.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to go through the agenda a little quicker because we do have an executive session right after this. I would just call your attention to a couple things within the agenda. One is the amendment to the code of conduct. So remember, we have a code of conduct. It's pushed through. We have a public hearing. Because it was already advertised, we're going to push forward with that document, but there was one change that a board member wanted to bring forward. So the way this will work, that document will go forward, it'll be passed, it's out there. But this one change will come back, it has to do with cell phones, which this might have to change again after our discussion this morning. But the verbiage that was added is while students may possess wireless communication devices in schools during non-instructional time, on school property, during and after school, etc. They must be powered completely off and stored out of sight during school hours. That was the requested language that was moving forward. So we would,
The policy said in a backpack, no? I mean, that's the words I think we changed it to.
well, not everybody has a backpack. So I think it says out of sight during school hours. So that was the language that was added.
I understand, it's just gonna be on anyway and vibrating in their pockets. It's just hard when it's in on their persons, you know? Because the state law also outlaws an opportunity for it to be stored away from them during class time, like the basket or teacher's desk or.
Well, we could certainly, put some sort of procedure about moving the backpacks away. I know certain schools do that. Clay High's one of those, for example, that I witnessed that.
So in the event they don't have a backpack, it goes in their pocket?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to do with their
Mr. Rossi,
pockets.
the language that's on the amendment is what is in the Neola policy. So the language that you guys voted on for Neola policy now matches this language.
And it may become another, might have to bring this back again if the pilot goes through. But I just want to call back because I know.
How does the state law read? I thought it said often somewhere. In a backpack behind, with the teacher?
If I'm not mistaken, the way that the statute reads, it reads that it needs to be off and away, and the teacher can direct the student where it needs to be put.
So are we specifying what away means? Because it really negates the whole policy if it's in their back pocket.
I don't think the statute specifies that, so I don't know that.
It doesn't.
That's the working statute on
I think that's why he was referring to procedures. So if you could put in procedures that if not, if they don't have a backpack, then put it in the teacher's basket.
So you're saying the policy doesn't state something about behind it with the teacher?
No, the statute doesn't specify.
Right. But it's a challenge when the kid doesn't have a backpack. What are they gonna?
There's not very many students, especially in high school, where the majority of the problems happen. They have a lot of books. They usually have something. Even girls would have a purse then, if not a backpack.
You know, I just want to be clear and say, okay, that's what the policy says, it matches the old policy.
I thought we changed
Looks like
it.
we might have to revisit it again
Yeah.
in the future. We just want to make sure that was out there. I was just trying to figure out what from this book
Yeah, I know.
would take interest in.
If we want to be successful, the wording's probably important, especially when it comes to teenagers. That's all I know for sure, so.
Then the transportation, the bus planner contract is on here. And there's also a proportionate mitigated share, which is 14 elementary students for a total of 763,000 roughly for a development. Which development is that? And it's for Lake Jasper.
Do they have any money out there to build?
It's Bellalago Townhomes in Lake Asbury.
So there is land?
Not different towns,
Yeah, so
is that a change?
Those look like the two things.
it's the second edition, the second prop share of Bellalago
So
Townhomes.
it's the third, actually. The third prop share for Bellalago. That whole area started out with 526 homes. Then they added another 76 homes. And then the developer bought another piece of property from an individual and added another 14 to that. And then we've had to go back and modify because they want to add 10 to the 76. It's been a years-long process with Bellalago. And it keeps, its nasty head keeps coming up and coming up and coming up.
When did they go for townhomes? Was that?
Probably to get more density within the area, so
Right,
this
right.
this previous one, this
Okay,
newest
just
one.
this news, okay.
And a lot of people can't afford a home anymore, so they do a townhome. Right.
Townhomes are the cost of what a home used to be.
Yeah, what they used to be. But I'm saying now we're in a market where people can't afford the single family when they're starting out. So they're having to put up all the townhomes. Anyway.
That's it.
So no more question, or no more comments? All right, any, let's see, here, comments from the audience, none from the superintendent, any, attorney?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Hanson? Ms. Johnson? Ms. Clark?
Real quick, I would like to add to the agenda that we go over a little bit of knowledge about self-funding insurance so that we recognize come October, when we change TPAs, there is no $3 million at the end of the rainbow. That is in claims and so that everybody understands. That's
Do you want to put this on the next board?
whenever we
workshop?
can, yeah, before October. just so everybody is clear on where the funds are going.
It's all funded.
Is that it? Anything else?
No.
Mr. Albert? Board comments? Did we send out our board letter?
I was about to ask that. You want it to go out today? Is everybody okay with it?
Please. Everybody, I figured they would give you their feedback and, all right. So if you don't mind, can we get that rolling? And I think you did a great job highlighting, where our money's being spent, some pictures. I know that our first one would be lengthy. So I think moving forward, we can do them, a little shorter, but to give the purpose of the audience, like, why are we sending this out and what are we doing? And I think it's a great opportunity to show what we are doing. So I think Ms. Dennis did a very good job on that. Thank you. And then another question I have for our legal and transportation. I know you had board consensus to start a contract for those that we pay for CDL license. Where are we at on that? Are we good moving forward on that? Does that need to come back for a vote? What do we need to do on that?
So as far as the contracts, I mean, we can do that. We want to make sure we have the enforcement mechanism, which I think the board's okay with. If people break the contract, then we can take legal action.
Okay.
We would just bring it to the board's attention with a legal update. I mean, these contracts are, they'd be a county court, they're not circuit. I mean, the minimum contract is under 50,000, right? So you're not looking at anything, small claims.
I just want to make sure you don't need anything else from us, that he has the ability to
No,
do
ma'am,
that.
I can get with Randall, we can make sure we wrap that up. There may just be, I just want to make sure, there may be an enforcement if we have, 10 drivers that we've paid for this, they walk. We want to make sure there's some teeth to it, so we would, and that would be through a small claims or through a county court action to enforce a contract, because we paid for them to get the license.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that he knew he was allowed to, and you didn't need anything from us.
No,
I know
ma'am.
we gave consensus for that to happen, that way you can do what you need to do on your end. Okay, well, that's all I have. This meeting's adjourned.
Recess, actually.
Recess.